After the rice was steamed, I lifted my skirt and squatted down by the threshold, watching the direction of the village entrance bitterly. Su Fang said that he would buy 2 big herrings to make soup for me in the evening to celebrate my recovery from the serious illness. By the way, I have been bothering for some time. Since the peach season of this year, he rescued the self-seeking me by the edge of the cliff, and the day has not gone smoothly. I seem to suffer from a strange disease, and I often forget everything when I wake up from a dream, including my first and last name. At that time, Su Fang would have to wake up early, lest I wake up first and panic because of the blank memory. He always said the same comforting words tirelessly, even if I would forget it again the next day. This situation lasted for a long time, until one morning, when I opened my eyes, I squeaked, "Su Fang, I'm thirsty." He was stunned for half a cup of tea before he went to boil the water. After a long time, his hands were still shaking. After that, my condition gradually improved. I occasionally had forgetfulness at first. Recently, I have read some trivial matters very clearly. Su Fang was in a good mood and went out early to earn money. He really condoned me. My temperament is not good, and I sometimes dislike the rough tea and light rice. When he buys the dried meat with the copper plate he saved, I start to talk about the neighbor Wang Ji wearing a new cotton robe. Su Fang rarely annoys me. When he ran into me unreasonably making trouble, he would listen patiently and try his best to satisfy me. I once asked him, "Why treat me so well?" After saving me, I found that I was a troublesome ghost. If I lost it, we didn't know each other. He replied, "It's mainly because I'm bored." I kicked him and screamed. He pursed his mouth and looked at me for a while, and said, "Gentle style, because I know the pain of no memory better than anyone." He Feng is the name he gave me. In fact, Su Fang was also given to him. He lost his memory when he was picked up by the village chief a year ago. Thinking back to the past. In fact, in my own heart, I don't want him to restore his memory. I often tell him that no matter what your past is, you are not allowed to leave me, but even if he promises 100 times, I never feel at ease. When I was being stupid, I pinched a hand on my face, and Su Fang's voice came from my ear, "Whatever I think, my saliva flows out." He stared at the herring in his hand again, "Xiao Yuer. Your mother thinks that your heart is broken." I pushed him hard, "You are its mother." His eyebrows bent, "You are his mother, I am naturally his father." I was enraged for a moment, and I concealed the corners of the slightly raised lips. Su Fang rubbed my head vigorously, "Has the cutting board been washed? I'll make a big herring soup for you." I don't know if he is good at craftsmanship, it's still fresh fish, I rarely eat it to my heart's content, and mysteriously handed him a jade xiao while he was washing the bowl, "For you." Su Fang was taken aback, and asked, "Where did it come from?" "Bought." "Where did you get so much money?" "Stored." Su Fang put on a posture of "You can't lie to me," and I confided, "I earned the laundry for the village chief's wife." There was a distressed look in his eyes. Now I can't give you good food, but if..." I asked, "What?" He paused for a while but refused to continue speaking. He just took me to sit down by the tree and said, "It's better to let me blow up to you." Xiao Sheng played slowly, the breeze blew, black hair flying, and the slanting way made him look like a person in the picture. I can't help but be silly. The days passed as calm and comfortable as imagined. Just when I thought we would continue to grow old like this, I accidentally saw a notice on the stone wall of the market. The missing person notice, it was Xia Yang Ho Shizi, Nai Ran. The Nai family, who is worthy of being the head of the 4 major families, has a vivid portrait on the notice, but anyone who has seen the deity of the world may not be able to recognize it. Not to mention the me who gets along with him day and night. When she got home, Su Fang was cooking in the kitchen, and the babble of the spatula swallowed all the words I weighed out on the way. He is the noble son of Xia Yang Ho, even if he doesn't dislike him, How can his family tolerate me, a wild girl of unknown origin? However, the one who should come will not be able to hide after all. When he woke up the next day, Su Fang did not sit by my bed as usual. I searched the whole room in a panic, but didn't see his shadow. Until I heard the movement in the front yard. I tiptoed to the door and saw the people kneeling in the courtyard with a look of horror on their faces. Su Fang just stood in it like Shi Shiran, his faint voice filled with majesty, "Give me all back." The headed elder said tremblingly, "My son, Lord Ho and his wife have been looking for you, and the young lady." Su Fang glanced at him coldly. I have never seen him look like this. From my perspective, it looks like an angry look. If I don't leave, you still want to hold me back. Those people fell silent immediately, and kept kowtow begging for mercy. Su Fang waved his sleeves impatiently and said, "Fine, I will return to Sui Yang to plead guilty to my father in a few days." It wasn't until the group of people left that Su just turned around, saw me standing by the door, and panicked, "Heffen, why are you awake?" I was stunned staring at him blankly. "When did you restore Nai Ran's memory?" Su Fang's expression changed slightly. "You all know?" "You?" I interrupted him, "Do you have a wife?" Su Fang couldn't continue. My tears dripped unconvincingly. "You want to go back to reunite with her?" Su Fang came over and took my hand. I threw it away. "If you want to go back, I will go back. I don't want you to be pitiful." Regardless of my struggle, Su Fang hugged me tightly, and said anxiously, "Heffen, how could I not want you? She and I have not formally visited the hall, so don't bother me." I trembled my hands and rubbed my eyes, and Su Fang kissed my tears. "Heffen, I don't like her. I will go back and tell my father that the person I want to marry is you. If they don't allow me, I will take you away. The sky is big and the earth is big, nowhere can it be home." He looked at me with bright eyes, and I cried for a long time before relieving, "You are not allowed to lie to me." He listened to me like this, took Yu Xiao off his waist, put it on my hand, and said, "If I change my heart, you will use this Yu Xiao to knock my head hard, okay?" I rubbed Yu Xiao and pouted, "Wouldn't it be cheaper for you?" Su Fang simply hugged me for a few circles, turning and laughing. At that moment, I really thought that whether he was Su Fang or Nai Ran, he would always love me like this forever. 3 days later, we set off for Sui Yang. Su Fang hired a carriage, and I complained about how much it should pay him. He also seemed to think it was a bit extravagant. "If my father insists on marrying someone else, I have to steal some of my mother's jewelry before elopement. Desperate world will be more calm." I heard him say this, but I was a little unhappy. "Your father likes that girl very much." Su Fang shook his head. "In recent years, the sage has been suffering from the dragon body, the prince is young, and the princess Xianji is in charge. The court may be turbulent at any time. I am Nai Ho Shizi, she is the daughter of Zhao Xiaofu. If the Nai and Zhao families can marry, that. I don't care about those, just ask your childhood sweethearts." Su Fang hurriedly denied, "I just treat her as a little sister." I said, "When you first rescued me, you told outsiders that I was your little sister." Su Fang solemnly said, "It is true that the first time I saw you, I was greedy for your beauty. Otherwise, what do you want to do with me if you love to jump off the cliff instead of jumping off the cliff?" I punched his wagon straight. When I arrived in Sui Yang, Su Fang placed me in an inn. He changed into a clean Confucian robe and handed over the silver dominance to me. He asked me to wait for him at the inn for one night, whether to go or stay, and come and tell me tomorrow. Since I lost my memory, I have never tried to spend the night alone. Grabbing his sleeves to prevent him from leaving, and saying that if I should not let me follow, Su Fang said that he will never let me suffer any harm, and he cannot promise to take me back to the house rashly. What will happen? I was wronged and satisfied. Su Fang poured a cup of tea, and smiled, if I can't come back tomorrow, you don't have to be afraid. My dad has probably caught it. I can always take you away. When I find you, I'm afraid that someone will be sent to persuade you. You have the right to be the wind in your ears, and you must not leave sadly like the weak woman in the playbook. I finally loosened his cuffs. Okay, I'll be entangled to the end. He kissed my earlobe. Don't be afraid, I will be with you, and the breeze. Later, I often dreamed back at midnight and regretted many times why I let him go that night. Su Fang never came back to find me. I stayed in the inn for 2 days, thinking that he was really under house arrest by his father, so I often pretended to be a passerby and wandered around Nai's house until one day I saw a tall blue-robed man walking out of the house. He wore a high hair crown and was extremely elegant and handsome, and his arms were holding a beautiful woman, walking slowly, as if he might hurt her if he walked too fast. It is Su Fang. I didn't cry or rush forward. At that time, I was lucky enough to think that Su Fang was just acting for his father. I followed them for a long way, until I saw the woman go into a clothing store to choose clothes, and then I stopped Su Fang on the right time. He saw me suddenly rushing out, a suspicion appeared in his expression, and I asked, Su Fang, why don't you come to me? He showed a clear look. The girl is afraid that she has confessed to the wrong person. He turned around after speaking. Admit the wrong person? I held him in disbelief. Su Fang, what are you talking about? Don't scare me. Su Fang stepped back respectfully. I am not the one the girl is looking for, my name is Nai. I was so anxious that my tongue knotted. I know your surname is Nai, you are Nai Ran, and you are also Su Fang. Perhaps because my emotions were too agitated, many passers-by stopped and watched. Su Fang waved away from me and whispered, Girl, please behave yourself. I was stunned. Su Fang, he never talked to me in this tone. At this moment, the woman walked out of the clothing store, looked at me carelessly, and asked Su Fang, Brother Ran, who is she? He glanced at me coldly, then turned to the woman, and said softly, I don't know. When my heart was stunned, it was cold, helplessness and fear flooded all over my body. Suddenly I remembered one time before, I deliberately pretended not to recognize Su Fang, so anxious that he was almost crazy, and then I couldn't hold back the laughter, and he was confused by me and was so annoyed that he ignored me for a long time. And this time, he said he had forgotten me. How I wish he suddenly bent down and laughed and said, Hello, you have been cheated. But I know not. I looked at him with indifference, alienation, and a trace of contempt. That's not Su Fang's look at Heffen, it belongs to Nai Ran, who I don't know. He really forgot about me. I looked at their backs, and just thought, if it ended in a simple way, then I would not be a gentleman. Su Fang is absolutely reluctant to be wronged in harmony. Then, without the gentle breeze guarded by the Su Fang, he would never tolerate the slightest grievance. I slowly clenched my fists and called Su Fang, Master Nai. He and the woman turned their heads at the same time, and Su Fang frowned. This girl, I said. I stretched out 2 fingers, and said, 1 year, the memory of this year, can young Master Nai still have an impression? He stayed for a while, then his expression changed. What do you mean by this girl? Master Nai clearly understands what I mean. Su Fang looked at me gloomily, and was about to say something. The woman beside him said, What are you talking about? But my brother was seriously injured and unconscious for a year, so how can I remember him? Her shrill pretending voice seriously interfered with my thinking. I had to look at her again. Is the girl Zhao Yanran, the daughter of Xiaofu Master? She stared at me in surprise. You are. You just said that young Master Nai was in a coma for a year, so do you know that if ordinary people do not wake up for a year, their complexion will become haggard and their actions will not change? I stared at her firmly. You think, Nai is the son like a person who has been in a coma for a year now? Zhao Yanran was speechless for a while and didn't know how to argue. Just when I thought things had turned for the better, Su Fang interrupted with a little angrily, "Enough. Without Yanran's every possible care for me, how would I wake up? Her affection, how can you let an outsider provoke you at will? This girl, no matter who you are sent, is to hinder our marriage or other conspiracies. If you are more alarmist, don't blame me for not thinking you are a woman." He put down his words and turned to take Zhao Yanran away, never looking back at me from beginning to end. I stood on the woven street in a daze, letting passers-by point and point me. In fact, I don't even know what they are talking about. In my mind, Su Fang's last voice echoed over and over again, like countless sharp knives, piercing my heart. Suddenly, I missed the former Su Fang very much, and I want to have a word with him. I want to say, "Su Fang, I really, have worked very hard so that no one hurts me. It's a pity that that person is you." Then, even the gentle breeze, which is not afraid of the sky and the earth, is powerless. I spent 2 days in the inn in tears. Of course, you will rest when you are tired, eat when you are hungry, and sleep when you are full. The so-called washing face with tears uses the time outside of normal work and rest. However, this does not mean that I am not sad enough. In fact, that night, I was really distraught. One who didn't want to open and close the door to unhook his belt and hang the beam and went to suicide. Then the beams of the house collapsed. After that, I was struggling to put the blame on the material of the wooden beams. The shopkeeper still made me lose a couple of dollars. He obviously thought it was mainly because I was too heavy. I was so distressed that I simply broke the jar and spent a lot of silver on food. It's always going to die, but also as a ghost. Although this inn is not strong, the cuisine is excellent, and I forgot to see the king of Yama. When I remembered, I had roughly passed the period of despair, and my sanity gradually returned to normal. I couldn't help but reflect on how I always committed suicide on impulse. Although I can't remember why I jumped off the cliff a year ago, silently hanging the inn is definitely a stupid act. Death is heavier than Mount Tai, and the low-key method of death has no meaning in life. I wondered about the vigorous sacrifices that came, such as being hanged at the wedding banquet hosted by Nai and Zhao's family. Thinking of this, I once again shed tears. I miss Su Fang so much, how to die for him, but he wants to marry another woman. Their wedding had an accident a year ago, and they renewed their marriage a year later. Maybe he doesn't care about the blank of 1 year, but for me, it is all that is full of memory. I don't think I can just sit back and wait for death. I should have the courage to grab my relatives. It is true that I will not be killed if I sit in the inn, and if I go to my relatives, I can probably get the long-cherished wish of heroic sacrifice. First of all, I don't have a wedding invitation, and I can't walk in openly. Then I don't have martial arts, and I can't break in unimpeded. In the end, the wall of Nai's mansion is really a bit high. Ji Shen died first. After thinking about it, I gave up this too radical idea, thinking that it would be safer for you to come out and talk about it. How to ask him out is another big problem. If I have enough time, I might consider stalking or following all day long. It's a pity that they will get married in the future. I wrote 2 letters. While Zhao Yanran was visiting the cloth, she used candied haws to lure a passer-by child, and handed one of the letters to her. Usually at this time, Zhao Yanran would ask after reading the letter, "Little brother, who gave this to you?" And the child immediately shook his head and said that he didn't know and then ran away. It was more logical. Who knew she only looked at the envelope? A crimson smile opened at a glance, and he rewarded the little brother with a silver coin, which really made me feel very horrified. Fortunately, her expression changed drastically after opening the letter, and she looked around in amazement, and finally hurried away carrying her skirt. This is the reaction of normal people. I walked out of the blind spot with my baggage on my back, wandered slowly along the street 2 times, and when I reached the entrance of Nai's mansion, I handed another letter to the guard at the gate and stuffed him the silver I snatched from my little brother. Go to the appointment contentedly. The place for the date is the bamboo forest on the outskirts of the city, and the date is Zhao Yanran. The reason for asking her was not because I was abandoned by Su Feng, so I empathized. Even if I really wanted to empathize, I wouldn't move to her, although I have to admit that she is a great beauty. At this moment, the beauty leaned alone in the standing bamboo forest, her delicate and gentle body was shaken by the wind, and it seemed weak. I quietly approached her and said kindly, "Miss Zhao wears so little, be careful of catching cold." Zhao Yanran saw that it was me who came here, and went back 2 steps, "You, how did you come here?" She was probably annoyed that I wasn't punctual enough, and I apologized, "Something has been delayed on the road, and I have to wait for a long time, Miss Zhao." She began to look around in a panic again, until she confirmed that there were only 2 of us left. She took out the letter I addressed to her from her sleeves, and gritted her teeth and asked, "Why do you want to write this letter in Brother Ran's handwriting?" I was stunned. No wonder she showed that look when she saw the letter. I thought it was the love letter written by her brother Ran to her. I smiled, I was intimate with him, so I know how to write him. What's so strange about words? Zhao Yanran stared at me angrily, "If you say that, he won't believe you." Since Miss Zhao is here, she's worried that the paper package won't keep the fire out, I said indifferently, "If you are not afraid, then why should we talk about it again?" After hesitating for a moment, she took out a stack of banknotes from her clothes and stuffed it to me. 1,000 taels, a lot of money, what about things? I was a little speechless for a moment, and I couldn't help feeling whether this young lady was too innocent. She didn't even understand the principle of paying with one hand and delivering with one hand. I took off the baggage, glanced behind her, and asked cautiously, "I don't know how Ms. Zhao's martial arts is." Zhao Yanran slowly turned her head in the direction of my eyes, and said with some fear, I don't know how to martial arts, what's the matter?" I breathed a sigh of relief and calmly took out the hemp rope from my bag. "That's good." Zhao Yanran stared at the hemp rope dumbfounded, and stammered, What are you going to do?" I said, "Don't worry, I don't know how to martial arts." She also breathed a sigh of relief. "I just didn't finish my words, but I have a lot of strength, and I should be able to beat you." Zhao Yanran. After I tied her 5 flowers tightly, she finally got tired of scolding, "If I lose a hair, my brother will never let you go." I leaned down and reached out and pulled out one of her hair. "Why don't I show this hair to you, but my brother will take a look and make him feel distressed." She probably had never seen a kidnapper like me, and she choked for a long while. Her appearance was really pitiful, and I sighed, "I won't harm you, but there are some things that I want to tell him in person." Pause. "Actually, you know me, you should also know why he forgot about me." She turned her head silently without answering, as if she was sad. I guessed why she was sad, but I really didn't want to think about it. When Su Fang came, it was exactly the time when the moon was sinking. When he saw us, a deep anger was brewing in those dark eyes. "Who are you anyway?" I was stunned for a while before I realized that he was talking to me. Just now, because of Zhao Yanran's noise, she had blocked her mouth with a pupa. At this moment, it looked like she was being held hostage. I simply exposed the dagger in my sleeve and pressed it against her. Next to his neck, "You take a step closer, don't blame the sword without eyes." He looked at me coldly, and finally took a step back. "What is your purpose?" "No purpose, just want to talk to you, Su Fang." I did not say that, but through the letter written to Zhao Yanran to him. "Do you know why she came?" "Because I told her that I have evidence of your life in Qinjiakan this year, and there is another one. Xia Yanghao looked for your notice that day, and exchanged these for her 1,000 taels of silver bills." I threw the silver bills in front of him. "Look, she actually gave them." Su Fang frowned and read the letter and notice, "You. My purpose is to tell you the truth. Although I don't know why you will forget all this year's events overnight, don't want you to marry her in such a days before you know the truth. Zhao Yanran wanted to shake her head helplessly, and for fear of being injured by the dagger, she had to open her teary eyes and sobbing aggrievedly. For a long time, Su Fang put down the letter, her voice couldn't hear the emotions. What does the girl want to tell me? Tell me that this year, I will become another person? But what does this have to do with me wanting to marry her? I said incredibly, aren't you curious about what happened this year? How do you know that after experiencing those things, will you marry her? Under the hazy moonlight, Su Fang looked at me for an instant. Could it be that the girl said I changed my heart during this year? My heart is tight. He said, I originally had a white-headed appointment with Yan Ran. If it is true as the girl said, wouldn't I be a guilty man? Since God made me forget this memory, why should I remember it? Meng Yanran is reluctant to give up. If you give up, I should treat her wholeheartedly, right? Is not it? I saw Zhao Yanran weeping. It turned out that I was wrong from the beginning. On that day, they were forced to separate the pair of fateful Mandarin ducks, and I took advantage of the vacancy to enter. Now, they are about to finally get married, and it's me who spoils the situation again. I pressed my lips tightly, restraining myself from crying. Su Fang stared at my hand holding the dagger. Don't let her go. I didn't let go, I was still, unwilling. But what can be done? That day, Su Fang asked me not to leave sadly. Now, what can I do besides leaving? I didn't even say goodbye to him. I took off the jade flute from my waist and looked at him. Can you play a piece of music for me? He coldly said, what tricks do you want to play? I threw Yu Xiao at his feet and said, that tune is called Su Feng He Yu. After you finish playing, I will let Miss Zhao go. He said, I have never heard of this name. Yes, Su Feng He Yu, this is Su Feng's composition for He Feng. He has forgotten Su Feng, so how can he remember it? He once said that if he changes his heart, let me hit him the head with Yu Xiao. But I was reluctant to do this after all, and just said, then I sing one sentence, you blow one sentence, okay? He did not refuse. In order to protect his Yan Ran, how dare he refuse? In the bamboo forest under the moonlight, a woman hums softly, and a man plays a flute in the forest. This scene is so beautiful, just like the years when the gentle breeze and the warm side were still in the countryside. He is my favorite Su Fang for the tone, the way of the flute, the calm and quiet gesture. But these are fake, I snatched them. Suddenly I couldn't sing anymore, and the sound of the flute stopped abruptly. Su Fang maintained the posture of holding the flute, and her plain expression suddenly moved. Girl, do you have love for me? I stayed for a while. He looked at me steadily, with a familiar look faintly revealed between his brows. I am in love with me in the past year. I trembled at a loss. Do you remember anything? Just as I took a half step to get closer to him, the black shadow in front of me passed by with the wind, and slapped a palm on my shoulder. In an instant, Su Fang was already holding Zhao Yanran. A few steps away from me. The grass was swaying in the wind, and I sat in it, holding my heart in confusion. I couldn't help wondering why this palm was clearly hit on my shoulder, but there was a piercing pain here. Su Fang unlocked Zhao Yanran's body and confirmed that she was not injured before he said to me, do you know what crime was committed in kidnapping the Prime Minister's daughter? I did not answer. It doesn't matter what the crime is. After a long time, he said, you go. Zhao Yanran surprised Ran said, Brother Ran, how can you just let her go like this? He didn't answer her, and said to me again, you go. I still failed to make it. The next moment, a white light appeared in front of him. For a moment of stunned, many people in black with knives suddenly appeared around me. Their goal was Su Fang. This group of people in black trained quickly, and the long and narrow shadows of the knives were able to retract freely, even if Su Fang had good skills. But when he attacked, he still had to be distracted to protect Zhao Yanran, and naturally fell into a disadvantage everywhere. Maybe they saw Su Feng attacking me earlier, thinking that Zhao Yanran is more worthy of a threat, so they ignored me sitting on the ground and recruited to force her. At this time, if I took the opportunity to escape, there would probably be no distractions. Catch up. It's a pity that I was silly again. When one of the men in black with the scarred eyebrows pointed the arrow tip of the hidden arrow towards Su Feng, I subconsciously threw myself to block it, and then, successfully blocked it. The development of the plot at this time is usually that I am limp on his back, and he turned around in shock to support me. Why do you do this? Because I like you. You, why are you? Don't feel guilty. From now on, stay with Ms. Zhao and grow old together. No. Gentle. I remember everything, don't leave. Then I died perfectly in his arms. But drama is like life, life is not as good as drama. Just as I felt the back pierced by the sharp blade, Su Feng swept away desperately, holding Zhao Yanran anxiously in the shadow of a sword. He didn't even notice that I stopped an arrow for him, and he was satisfied with Zhao Yanran. I don't know if the arrow pierced my back into a hole, but when the sharp pain spread all over my body, the pain in my body was far less than the pain in my heart. It's a pity that I couldn't die at that moment. The man in black can't believe that there is still my stupidity in this world who can block arrows for others. The point is to block and be ignored by the person. He probably also feels that living like me has long been unlovable, so he waved at me. The knife wanted to end this life for me, but Su Feng stopped him with a loud noise. He didn't know I was hit by an arrow. Go away. I was so painful that I couldn't speak, and Zhao Yanran also frightened her legs. How could she walk? The men in black surged up like a rising tide, and Su Feng chopped and said, "Go." I saw his anxious look, I didn't know where it was. I wiped the blood dripping from the corner of his mouth, struggling to prop up, and dragged Zhao Yanran towards the cliff. I think I'm really crazy. I can't even care about her, but I don't think it's too crazy. At least I can think of a river under the cliff. Maybe I can find another life. The pain in the vest spread quickly, and I moving forward with difficulty. I don't know if I will die from exhaustion in the next moment. Suddenly, Zhao Yanran asked in a thin voice, "Why, you want to block this arrow for him?" Her lips were pale. He obviously doesn't remember you anymore. I didn't go too far and climbed to the edge of the cliff. Looking back, Fang Yi stepped back towards it, and then whispered to Zhao Yanran, "He will remember me one day. Just thinking about it like this will make you feel very happy." A choked throat, jump down, he is very water-based, he will definitely save you. At the moment when I turned and fell off the cliff, I heard Su Feng call Zhao Yanran's name silently. I close my eyes and pray for God, and that's it. I don't know how long I have been floating in the cold water, and I heard a familiar voice, "Hold on." Suspecting that I had auditory hallucinations, I raised my head and opened my eyes with difficulty, and I actually saw Su Feng. I was ecstatic, thinking that it was worth dying at this time, but I saw Zhao Yanran in his arms tightly in a swaying spirit. Pay close attention. Not to me, but to Zhao Yanran. He said again, "Don't be afraid, I will be with you, Yanran. Don't be afraid, I will be with you, gentle wind." The same voice, the same words, linger in the ears, lingering in the heart. Zhao Yanran clutched my sleeve tightly and said to Su Feng, She was hit by an arrow." "Oh." Su Feng turned his head to look at me, her dark eyes were cold. The girl knows her life is unsafe, so she is thinking of La Yanran's burial. She is really a snacky heart. Fom-hearted? Su Feng, what is he talking about? Suddenly he felt the turbulent impact of the river. Su Feng clung to the wall rock tightly, and shouted at Zhao Yanran with great difficulty, "The current is too big, if you don't let her go, we will all die. Zhao Yanran can't catch me anymore, brother Ran, we can't help but die." Wrists tightened suddenly, and Su Fang held me at the very moment, with a cruel expression, "I am saving you for Yanran's sake." The shadows of the mountains were scattered, and there was a mist in front of him. I guess if he saw it, he would think it was grateful. Now, I finally know why God has not let me breathe. That is to make me see clearly and completely crush my dreams. The unstoppable loss of life, the past is like a revolving lantern, which flickers and disappears. I felt like a dead fish, caught tightly by the hook, and I tried to raise my head and keep my eyes open, but in any case I couldn't overlap the two shadows. I slowly freed a hand, but did not reach him. Instead, I turned to my back and held the arrow. The blood slid down between my fingers. As I gripped it tighter and tighter, I suddenly pulled out with all my strength. "Come out." Maybe it was because the movement was too big, or maybe this movement was bleeding marks, and Su Fang froze there. "You after all," I did not dare to tell him that the arrow was blocked for him. I was afraid that he would ridicule me, a woman who is like a snake and scorpion. Tears from my eyes blurred my vision, and Zhao Yanran's voice was heard in the wind. I couldn't hear a word. In fact, I was very afraid of death. Although I often disregarded death and life, it was because I thought Su Fang would always be with me. Around. I heard myself say softly, "Young Master Knight, you just asked me if I am in love with you. Now, I will tell you. No. The person I like is called Su Fang." The moment the arrow pierced his arm and grabbed me, it coincided with a huge wave hitting, and the heavy weight in my heart seemed to vanish in a flash. This suicide shouldn't be messed up again. That's great, so I can go to Su Fang. The Su Fang who would be pierced to death by a needle because of the Japanese wind, the best Su Fang for the Japanese wind in the world. The woods are clear and fragrant, and the slender willow branches and willow leaves are green. To be able to see such beautiful scenery means that I am still alive. The heavens treated me thinly and thickly, torturing me to death, and finally showing mercy to leave me alive. I ran into the canoe of Yuhulang Zhong along the river, and he explained to me after he rescued me, "The water in your lungs is driven by me with the 9-turn reincarnation needle. The secret recipe for hemostasis. In fact, it's all nonsense. Simply put, his medical skills are strong and he is kind." The genius doctor of benevolence was surnamed Zhou, and he refused to say his name alive and well. I guess there is something unspeakable about him when he is old, and Chuan is too lazy to ask. He said that he was leaning on this Yebianzhou all the way north to Beijing, in order to catch up with the hospital trial. It was a very good thing, but he complained all the way. I asked a few words in my spare time, and he babbled that he had a masterful medical talent, but he had no choice but to enter the world and follow the customs to fight for a fame, and he was ashamed of his master's teachings. I didn't want to hit him, but seeing him blindly promote myself, I couldn't help refuting, "If you are really capable, the hospital is not looking forward to you." He blew his beard and stared and cursed, "No matter how good an old man's medical skills are, he hasn't healed a big man. How can he become famous? It's rare to save you such a little girl from Gaimanguan, and there is no other testimony. In the end, it is not in vain. He was saved in vain after all. I'm neither a big man who is famous all over the world, nor is he a good man who runs a shelter." When the boat drew ashore, we parted ways. Earlier, he muttered that he was not entangled all the way. After taking away my silver for the consultation, he enthusiastically asked me to go home earlier and go to Beijing for the examination of the doctor. I really don't know where to find my home. I used to think of a person as the only person in this world, but it wasn't until the moment he forgot me that I realized that the sky is so big that I don't belong to any place at all. I wandered all the way in ragged clothes, without eating or drinking, thinking in a daze. It turned out that the end of my life was a corpse street. Facts have proved that I failed to die from falling off a cliff, failed to die from hanging, failed to die from the dark arrow, failed to die from the surging river, and naturally did not die from hunger and cold. When I passed by the steamer stall half deadly, staring at the uncle vendor, swallowing my saliva, the plot in my mind was when he learned that I didn't even have a son and waved to drive people away. Unexpectedly, the uncle stuffed 2 buns and gave me, "The little girl ran away from home, go back early, and don't worry the family." When I squatted shivering in the cold wind, feeling sad that I would never see tomorrow's sun again, the old woman who happened to come out to carry water forced me into the house and grilled me, saying that I would not agree with me to spend the night outside. At this time, I can't help my nose sore, and I can't help but complain whether the folk customs of this place are too simple. Isn't this the suburbs of Beijing? It's only a few steps away from the prosperous and luxurious capital. Just when I let myself when it was born and died but couldn't be destroyed anyway, it accidentally ran into a bad show of officers and soldiers oppressing the people. It's also a coincidence that the people who were oppressed were the uncle who generously gave the buns a few days ago. These officers and soldiers with knives around their waists smashed his stall and rushed into his house for a long time, but after listening to the leader drank something, the uncle Baizai who knelt down and begged for mercy was full of grievances, and was undoubtedly ignored. I leaned on the side while eating buns while observing the development of the situation. I saw an ant with a bulging stomach running out of the room, chasing me and Gong, and she was indeed the uncle's wife. The officers and soldiers thought that she was an eye-catching push and hustle and bustle, so I realized the seriousness of the matter and hurriedly got up to support the ant who was about to fall. The officers and soldiers who had no obstacles took the uncle away smoothly. Not far away, another group of sergeants blocked the bustling road, and ordered the people on both sides to kneel down, saying that it was Princess Xianji who was on the tour and was sympathetic to the people. Upon hearing the name of the princess, the originally proud officers and soldiers hurriedly let out the debut, and they couldn't stop laughing. I think this Princess Lao Shizi is full of food and support. If she really wants to be sympathetic to the people, it is not as reliable as a private visit in a microservice. Such a posture is purely showing off her prestige. The Golden Palace chase came on coming with the mighty team, the majesty of the scene needless to say. The princess was sitting in the square car chariot, no one could see her appearance, she wanted to come, she was passing through the curtain looking down at the harmonious scene where a group of people kneel down neatly, my heart is very refreshing. It's a pity that God won't let her enjoy herself. The ant in my arms was probably too irritated and unconscious. She rushed to the front, tears on her face and a heart-piercing roar, "His Royal Highness, I hope that your Royal Highness will be the master." I couldn't help but support the forehead, so I said that it is more convenient to visit the microservices privately, so that I don't know how many people should be recruited. The princess deserves to be the princess, and she was not moved by how his aunt's cry was exhausted, and let the sergeants drag the aunt aside until Feng Jie went away without saying a word. When the car left and the people dispersed, what was left was the aunt who was limp on the ground and weeping in despair. I thought for a while, helped her into the house, soothed and said, "Auntie, don't worry, tell me what is going on, and see if I can help." She looked at me suspiciously, and I explained, "I have been favored by you. No more than 2 buns." She looked at me for a while, and finally shook her head, "I understand the girl's kindness, but this matter is really difficult. Although she has limited expressive ability, it is not difficult to understand." Aunt's grandfather, the uncle named Wang Qi, their original son was a housekeeper in the Ling's house in the capital. 2 years ago, he said he had a sudden illness. When the housekeeper there brought him back, his body was already rotten. It was miserable for the couple to take their fate. It's been a long time, I don't know where Wang Qi fights. It sounds like the son actually killed the young master of the Ling family. He happened to be seen on the day of the incident. He was sad and angry and sued the young master of the Ling family to the office of the capital. It is said that this Ling family is a big family in the capital, and the new official Yin of the Yamen house is unwilling to offend him. In addition, although Wang Qi has human evidence but no physical evidence, this case will not end. However, young Master Ling's family didn't have that big measure. It's just a matter of finding faults in 3 days. This time it's even called the house vault loses 100 taels of silver. The thief tracked him to catch up with Wang Qi house. No, that group of officers and soldiers were really in his house. The key to the vault was found, and he was taken to prison. If he was promoted to the hall 2 days later, if the case was settled, decades of imprisonment would be inevitable. I said, it's obvious that young Master Ling wants to get rid of the thorny problem. Although there are loopholes in this case, they insisted on one official and one business, and the uncle is afraid that he will be charged with a real crime. Auntie exchanged tears when she heard the words. I said again, originally you could consider going to the criminal ministry to appeal, but she just ignored your princess, and those officials will hear about it. She is the princess of the prison, and His Royal Highness also gave 3 points. So, this one. Who else would dare to intervene in the case? At this moment, I was surprised that my thinking was especially clear, but I don't know why. My aunt cried so much that I almost fainted. I reflected on whether I was not speculative, and was about to silence, but listened to her crying, if he doesn't come back, I can't live alone. This sentence picked on my heartstrings, and I got up to grab the door, but the thought that had been pressing in my heart lingered, and finally stopped. Auntie was obviously shocked when she saw me going back and forth, and I reluctantly laughed, because I didn't want to live anymore, so why not help them? 2 days later it was the 4th day of the 7th month of the lunar calendar. 7474 was homophonic to die and die. The meaning is not good. I really want to retreat. However, I was too full of words before and had to bite the bullet and go into battle. This lesson made me think twice. And the essence of the latter, the so-called eating a ditch and gaining a wisdom, I don't know if I still have the opportunity to use this wisdom, but I can only comfort myself and hear the Tao, and I will die at night. The office of the capital is really extraordinary. The officials from the 6 rooms and 3 classes gather to line up the office. Even the office is majestic. The uncle and aunt are almost stunned by the prestige. I stand in the hall and feel that my body is just like my thoughts. He fluttered and didn't focus, his eyes looked at the direction of young Master Ling from time to time. In fact, I was just feeling how this handsome young master could do such a cruel and inhuman thing, but when he winked at the majestic adult in the hall, I instantly realized it. Then again, as Wang Qiwan's niece, I was able to live in their home on the night of the incident. Dalila stayed in the hall as an eyewitness. I also owe it to this young master of the Ling family. He said that I was desperately short of silver and wanted to cooperate with him to frame the uncle. As soon as he heard it, he happily gave me 1 or 2 silver, and promised to give me another 1 or 2. Use 2 taels of silver to buy someone to perjury, and believe it privately it wouldn't be wrong if his IQ was really planted in my hands. Master Fu Yin's routine guilt, the point is that what he's talking about is true. Anything like Yexiang's husband who sells fried dough sticks can be used as witnesses. In the end, I acted more realistically. I saw it in my dreams. The uncle carried a box secretly in the backyard, and when he opened it, it was full of white money. When it came to this, Fu Yin and the young master of the Ling family showed satisfied smiles. Ordinarily, the case has all the evidence, and it can almost be concluded. The story often has a divine turn at the very beginning of the day. At this time, some people watching the trial outside the hall questioned, "Girl, you said that you saw the silver in the box in the courtyard late at night, but there was no moon at all on the 1st day of July. How did you saw?" As soon as I was in a daze, Master Ling was startled, and Master Fu Yin said angrily, "Boldly spoil the people, dare to make a noise in the court, come. The person is gone." I sighed. 12 taels of silver invited a loud beggar on the street to roar, and then slipped away while everyone was paying attention to the court. It was really worthwhile for him. Therefore, he should be generous and not naive. People think that 2 taels of silver can buy people's hearts. Acting in a full set, I acted in a solemn manner, the uncle, he lit a torch. Someone among the crowd retorted, isn't it heavy rain that night? How to light a torch? Yes, people who stole something would dare to see the light. This time it was all spontaneous. The strong questioning caused everyone to talk about it. I pulled Ling Xiao's sleeves. Master, I have said what you said, why don't they believe it? There was silence all around for an instant. Young Master Ling pointed at me with a trembling face and fingers, so you are in collusion, you are slander. What's the matter with slander? I continued to cry with a sad face, will you give me that 1 or 2 pennies? The scene is undoubtedly chaotic. In the end, Lord Fuyin's gavel to quell the commotion, he furiously said to me, I can see it, you guys are here to disturb the court on purpose. You have finally seen an Iduan here. I watched the play come to an end, loosened my tight face, and said sternly, they were not guilty in the first place, my lord. Fuyin stared at me with my ability to change face quickly like flipping a book, and sneered for a long time. The officers and soldiers of this palace found the key to the vault of the Ling family in Wang Qi home. Did you mean that the officer deliberately colluded to frame Wang Qi? This is indeed a serious remark. Normally, you should deny. How dare you dare, an adult is honest and fair, how can you do such an act? But since I made up my mind to save the uncle, I naturally answered, I am this means. There was a sound of cold air in the court. Fuyin is so angry that his nose is crooked, he said, boldly spoil the people, dare to frame the imperial court ordering officer, come here, and be punished by 50. I stood up calmly, looked around in my sleeves, and said sharply, who dares? This who dare sound requires both a touch of inattentive majesty and a calm demeanor. The expressions and movements must be accurate. Although I have practiced indecently in the past 2 days, it is at this moment I can interpret it smoothly, and I can't help but admire myself. The government officials were obviously frightened by me, and did not rush forward immediately, and Fuyin was even more confused. Why don't I dare? You, who are you? I hooked the corner of my mouth, took out a jade pendant from my arms, shook it in front of his eyes, and said slowly, I don't recognize this palace, is it possible that you don't even recognize it? Fuyin's blank expression instantly froze after seeing the words on the jade pendant, and she couldn't stop trembling. You are Princess Zionji. I put away the jade pendant and sneered, I don't think I have no eyes. This can be regarded as a routine in the playbook. He was pale and stunned for a while, and hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed, go down. See your Royal Highness the Princess, the officer has no eyes to know Taishan, and I hope the princess will forgive me. Looking at the people kneeling down and begging for worship, I rubbed the jade pendant in my arms, wondering if this situation was a bit too smooth, and how it was different from what I had expected. It is true that I bought this jade pendant in a jade shop, and the brocade on the top is also carved by myself. The indentation is on it, and it is very different from the real Fengyi Yuding. This mansion should not be in the brain, even can't distinguish this? Seeing that I didn't answer, he said with horror, I don't know why the princess is dressed, and why. A few days ago, this woman broke into the palace, Feng Hu shouted in justice. I don't know if you heard of this matter. Slightly heard. Hanomiyahara didn't bother about it. Later, I thought about this woman who dared to run into this palace. Maybe she was wronged yet. Moreover, the prince is also very concerned about the new adult's appointment. I smiled and tried my best. It's weird, my palace is disguising, first to find out the case, and second to see if you are in prison at the capital of the capital, how can you expect? I deliberately prolonged the syllables and didn't finish speaking. Fuyin swallowed and kowtowed, it's not good to go to the government. Seeing that the young master of the Ling family was already so scared that he could kneel down unsteadily, I said to the uncle and aunt gently, my palace testifies that Wang Qi is innocent, you can get up. The uncle and aunt stared at me blankly, and kept kowtowing to thank me. My face was calm and relaxed, and my heart was very distressed. Please don't worship it or not. If you wait for a long time, you will wear it for help. When the time comes, can't escape to whip the corpse. At this time, someone suddenly said, "She is not a princess." Everyone rushed to look in the direction of the sound source, but it was an elderly man. I recognized her as the water-carrying mother who took me in that night. She tremblingly said to me, "Girl, you were so cold that night. Shaking all over, I saved you, do you remember? Ouch, pretending to be a princess is a capital crime. You can't mess around. There has been chaos, and I might have escaped a catastrophe. You shouted like this, it's an ironclad thing to whip the corpse," the old woman. Fu Yin saw something was wrong. He hesitated for a moment, got up, sent someone to take the old woman to the court, and interrogated carefully, not to mention that she was slow in age and her ability to remember things was not bad. The ramifications of the ramifications didn't make any difference, just follow the truth. Like. Well, this time it's true. After listening to Fu Yin, she was a little bit stunned, but he didn't seem to be daring to confirm it. He was afraid that if the princess was really full and he was going to experience the folk life, he would not be able to eat and walk around, so he went to ask young Master Ling again, "I have attended a palace banquet with my father, do you recognize her as the princess?" Young Master Ling scratched his head and looked at me. At first I saw that it was a bit similar, but now it doesn't look much like it. I sighed in a melancholy way, so to say that young Master Ling said this was nothing, and at first glance I knew that I had never seen the princess deity at all. Fu Yin was obviously aware of this, and finally turned his gaze back to me, "Can you give me another look at the jade pendant?" I shrugged and said, "Please feel free." Fu Yin took the jade pendant and looked at it for a while, and finally pointed to me, "You are not a princess at all." I raised my eyebrows. "This jade is of poor quality, and the carvings are vulgar, so it won't be in the palace. Be bold and dare to pretend to be a princess." At the moment there was absolutely no play, and I couldn't run away, so I just grabbed my hands. Unexpectedly, I suddenly ran into a government office from outside the government office, and hurriedly said, "My lord, Mr. Song is here, saying I want to see you." The Mansion Yin said that he turned up his head and laughed, "Hurry up. I don't want to come to visit him, it's really a coincidence. Are all the messengers provoked?" I can finally breathe a sigh of relief. In fact, all false testimonies and fake jade pendants are all floating clouds. All these people are always trying to make this case of pretending to be a princess. Since she had neglected it before, then only by letting her pay more attention to this case can there be a turn for the better. After all, this ridiculous unjust case can't help being deliberated at all. Of course, it does not rule out that the princess will kill all the people in her anger to vent her hatred, but after thinking about it, Wang Kairuo will be convicted sooner or later, and will not escape sooner or later. What's wrong with betting on a game? As for me, if I can return to the West in this way, although it won't be dead without regret, it can be regarded as a good death. When I was in a trance, I heard Fu Yincheng's apprehensive worship, and then I was shocked to realize that Lord Ma had stepped into the hall. House Yin said, "Master Song, you came by coincidence. Here is a wicked woman who pretends to be a princess, intending to disturb the court." "Oh." A light and calm voice, "Who has the courage?" "It's just this girl who is just a mere seldom." I turned around in relief. It was a straight figure, and the black official robes set off an elegant and noble style, like a green wave in spring. It was so beautiful. It turns out that this is the famous Daking first consort. Some people are born with a good skin, while others are born with a golden spoon. Those who possess the former may not necessarily possess the latter, and those who possess the latter may not necessarily possess the former. Those who possess both must be condemned by God. I thought so. Seeing me, he froze, and said incredibly, "You? Me what? Don't just pretend to be your wife, what's so surprising?" He still looked at me steadily, looking straight into my eyes with clear eyes. I was a little frustrated by this look, and took a step back. What he didn't expect was that he hurried forward to greet me. Don't give me a chance to react, and try my best to hug me. There is an old saying in the ancients that if you survive a catastrophe, you will have a blessing. For a long time, I don't understand why I haven't died in catastrophe for several times, so I have been so late. Now I remember, I can't help feeling that this future blessing is not coming, but the blessing is too big and needs to be slowed down. Once it comes, it will be fierce. The horse hugged me for a long time and spit out 2 words, princess. At that time, my chaotic mind came out inexplicably. When Song Lang Sheng was born as a royal guardian, Tiangongxian was the most beautiful and graceful, and Xiao Qitang, the princess of Xianji, covered the sky with one hand. Princess Xianji is the most noble princess of the Daking dynasty, and the elder sister of the prince. In fact, according to the thinking of ordinary people, where can a little princess be noble? See if she was born on the face of the royal family, give a delicious silk and satin. If you happen to be attacked by a fan, you can send it to make some promote the friendly relations between the two countries. The common people waved their handkerchiefs symbolically, and the official historian waved a big pen. This life is not in vain. However, there are always special exceptions. When the current emperor was not the emperor, his most respected sister died on the battlefield because of a negligence and exhaustion. It is said that the eldest princess took his hand before she died and said that she would be reborn as his daughter, hoping that he would not be sad. Everyone knew it was a comforting nonsense, but the young emperor happened to believe it. Later, when he begged his wife, he was thinking of having a princess. I don't know if it's too good or bad. The belly of these concubines is more competitive, and the boys are rushing out. Some old eunuchs said that during that period, the emperor occasionally looked at his princes in a row. It's full of loneliness and suspicion. Princess Xianji came out at this time. One can imagine how outrageous His Majesty's care for him is, not only canonized her biological mother as the queen, but also appointed her brother as the prince. Even though there were occasional concubines giving birth to princesses after that, given that the love that everyone can offer is extremely limited, His Majesty, the Emperor, is no exception, so this princess has never bothered to fight for the love of his father. There is no doubt that the princess who grew up with the stars and the moon inevitably develops some bad habits, such as extravagance, arrogance, and domineering, and over time, the princess' reputation reverberates throughout Beijing. Su was from then on, the court officials began to make bad ideas. In the year of the princess and the emperor, the Tubo attacked and celebrated, and the envoys later asked for peace. The king of Tibet wanted to form a friendship with Daking. At this time, there are always foolish officials in the DPRK who are destined to become cannon fodder. Faithful and straightforward, his words are vigorous, as if the emperor refuses to allow marriage, the world will be in chaos and the people will suffer. The emperor couldn't bear it. Iking makes sense, but I really don't want to let my children go to that bitter cold place. Shang Shifu of the Ministry of Rites knelt on the ground, tears streaming down his face, straight to the ministers who knew His Majesty's sufferings. The emperor laughed as soon as he heard it. I am really moved by Iking's loyalty to the monarchy, but you don't know. The fan is so happy with the male appearance. This time I also frankly said that if a man is better with his relatives, I was still worried about my grandfather and Daking man. Condescend to Fan Bang, since Iking has so sacrificed herself for the people, I can't bear to give you some kindness. In the same year, the only son of Shangshu of the Ministry of Rites put on a red wedding gown, and went to Tubo desolately in the surging river of tears. The blood and tears of history cannot be ignored. In this way, Princess Xianji is quite prestigious in the DPRK. It is said that the palace is ruthless, but before the princess was 15 years old, it was still calm. The brothers and sisters in the harem and concubine get along very harmoniously, but the good times will not last long except for those who are good at war, such as the King of Wisdom, and those who are 1,000 miles away are as Clean Wang, a man of odd nature, such as King Kong, and the rest of the crown princes are basically either dead or disabled, and most of them are condemned for treason. Coincidentally, when the brothers went to Huangchuan together hand in hand to fight for the dragon chair above, the most wise and famous prince abandoned the emperor to travel around the world for the woman he loved. The emperor's dragon body is not as good as before. The political affairs were also somewhat inadequate, and after several thoughts, 2 decrees were issued. One is to register Xiao Jinjian, the 11th prince who is only 14 years old, as the new prince, and the other is to register Xiao Qitang, the princess of Xianji, as the superintendent of the state. 2 days after the edict was delivered, the memorials of impeachment by the supervisors have not yet been worked out, and they are brewing emotions to prepare for the honest advice of the upper court. Since then, Princess Xianji was naturally pushed to the forefront of the limelight. After such a half-year period, the reputation of covering the sky with one hand came to the fore. The above-mentioned things are what I have generally understood in the past few days. It is said that the actual situation is more complicated, and a careless person may fall into a situation where it is impossible to recover. Said that these people who are said to be a messenger, after he finally accepted my amnesia, often alarmist talkers, listening to him describe the many old days, I can only say that I am quite helpless. It is true that I have been weighing the fact that I am a princess for a long time, so that I can't fully digest it now. Last time when I said that I was a princess in the courtroom, I was dismantled by Fu Yin and was held by the husband, and then I lost the following text. Actually, I can't blame me, and I don't know whether I was physically exhausted or I was too irritated. In short, I fainted and woke up. After coming, he lay on the soft couch in the princess mansion. Hearing that Fu Yin was also shocked and planted on the ground, the scene was not too chaotic. Fortunately, this bad show succeeded in cleaning up the young master of the Ling family. Wang Qi and his wife were able to get rid of their grievances and seek justice for their son. This is all because of Dali Temple's careful observation, and it has nothing to do with me who is resting in the mansion. Of course, since Dali Temple Ching Song Langsheng is my consort, I still have a little credit. I first woke up that day, and after seeing him sitting in a few cases, there was a pile of files on the desk, a pair of eyes staying on it, sometimes frowning, sometimes smiling, the half of my face facing me looked like a candle light. The Nam pen is hooked, and the look is like spring. If such a person is willing to smile, the intoxicating spring breeze will linger in his heart and stay for a long time. At that time, half of my head was dizzy, and when I had entered the Yin Cao netherworld, I blurted out with the following consciousness, "Are you a judge?" Later Song Langsheng told me that he almost thought that I had lost my mind at the time, and it shocked him to almost go crazy. I guess I used to be very fond of cohorts. Not only is he not good looking, but he treats me meticulously, except for his slightly weird temperament. For example, although we collapsed and slept together these few days, he probably took into account my frail body and did not make the gift of transgression, but he suddenly wanted to lean over and kiss me in the middle of the night last night. I pushed him away in shock and saw him froze. I hurriedly remedied myself. I have lost my memory now, and you are still very strange to me, so before I finished speaking, Shiran climbed out of the bed and put on his robe to go out, and at the end he threw the sentence, "I will go back to my room, don't make the princess embarrassed." I was a little nervous thinking whether he was upset, but he turned back and stood before my collapse after a short while, unwillingly stretched out his finger to point to the pillow in my collapse. I'm used to sleeping. I stayed for a while and reacted and gave him the pillow. After he left without saying a word, I was a little sure that he was really angry. In addition to the prince's prince, he rushed out of the palace the night after learning of my return. Seeing that I hadn't woke up, he called 10 or 8 doctors. The doctors said that I just ate too little sleep. It's not enough to be physically exhausted, just take a few days of recuperation, but the prince still drags me hard and refuses to leave. If it's not for the concubine to persuade me, I am afraid that the royal doctors will have to be busy. Song Langsheng said that the only person who knew that I had been missing for more than half a year was the crown prince, that is, my younger brother. At that time I asked, during my absence, did you and the prince try to conceal it? Yes. The horseman replied, I found a woman who looked like a princess, and changed her appearance to be a princess every day. After the screen, it was difficult for the ministers to distinguish. Why do you want to do this? For the stability of the court, and to protect the safety of the princess. Song Langsheng said, the battle between the DPRK and China has intensified due to the emperor's illness. The conflict between the two parties is self-evident. Although King Rui and King Kong did not intervene on the face, they were suspected of making friends with them in private. The Nai and Ling families of the four major families also meant to infiltrate the cabinet, and the other two. Although you can stand still, I'm afraid I'm watching the tiger from across the mountain, waiting for an opportunity. The current situation is chaotic, and you, princess, are the center of balance constraints. My hair bones are chilling, me. Zhao Xiaofu used to be the princess's young teacher, and he had a great friendship with the princess. Li Qiaojia would have looked at the queen and let the princess 3 points. Rui Wang and Kong Wang watched the princess grow up since they were young, and they doted the princess in every way. The prince's age Shang Qing, relying on the princess even more, so. In fact, the simplification of such a long passage of the prince horse means that there are several forces in the DPRK now contending. The main personnel are my master, my uncle, my brother, and my younger brother. The people who came out to govern at this time were me. Dad, his old man is not in good health. It just so happens that my personal relationships with this group of people are pretty good, so he left this arduous task to me. On the bright side, I seem to have mastered it. The power of life and death, overturning the clouds and rain, is actually an existence that pours cold water. When one of the parties is about to overwhelm the other, I will come out and say friendlily, yo! Brother, don't hurt your peace, come, sit down and have a cup of tea. In the end no one won. Over time, there is no way to vent this full stomach, and it tends to be directed at that person. This is the reason why things like killing the king and usurping the throne occasionally happen in history. Of course, most people still fear to persuade people to be a person, otherwise the dragon chair rotates too fast, and it is meaningless to sit up. To get back to the subject, according to Song Langsheng, before this, I, the persuasionist, did a good job. At least I went to the world to rise to peace. With me assisting the prince, his position as the crown prince was still considered stable. So after learning that I was missing, the first thing the prince did was to conceal. Just imagine, if people learn about the disappearance of Princess Jiangguo, who will be the top priority, whether it is King Rui or King Kong, the crown prince must be suppressed at that time. Going deeper, no matter who the winner is, I'm afraid that we all hope that the princess who has been living among the people will never return. The prince used a fake princess for more than half a year, and now I can easily be found. It should be a good thing, but, sadly, I am amnesia. In this situation, let alone dealing with political affairs, you can't even recognize people's heads. You can't just stand up to the court and point your finger, hey! So who, what you said is very emotional, I support you. Which courtier can be convinced of this kind of princess of the country? As for whether to inform the prince of the amnesia, Song Langsheng thinks it is up to me to decide. Looking up at the lotus top on the room, I mumbled a sentence that shouldn't come from the royal family. This princess is not as comfortable as her father-in-law. It is true that being a princess is not as good as a princess. Song Langsheng's words brought me back to reality. I frowned and stared at him. His face was stern, and he stopped making a sound. Alas, I was still annoyed by what happened last night, and didn't even give me a good look at the meal. At the moment, only the two of us are sitting in the hall. After the maids put on the dishes, they stepped back. The princess, who had eaten thin porridge for a few days because of physical weakness, was salivating looking at the colorful dishes on the table. After tasting them one by one, I was satisfied and used it. When I was half full, I realized that Song Langsheng hadn't moved his chopsticks from beginning to end. He only held the dossier and read it carefully. I thought about it for a moment, and stretched out my hand to pinch the one that tasted the most. Put the good dishes in his bowl, and said, "This breeze salamander is really delicious, you can try it too." Song Langsheng raised his head, looked at me again with those bright eyes. "How did the princess learn that this dish is called King Feng salamander?" I froze. "Yes, how did I know that this dish is called Qing Feng salamander?" I blurted out subconsciously. I blinked. Did I like this dish very much before? The princess really loves salamanders very much. Song Langsheng chewed slowly and slowly said, "The princess remembers it, but she doesn't remember me anymore. I think I can't even be as good as a fish. Here we go again." I smiled hesitantly. I don't even remember myself, but I still remember the name of the pack horse, so in comparison, the pack horse is heavier than me. In fact, the reason why he can remember his name is only because of his reputation. So if he can make him smile, it's okay. Who knows that after a pause with his hand, his unhappy look remains the same, and I just gave up this unrealistic idea. This guy clearly has a good-tempered and well-behaved face. For example, he has a pair of black and moist eyes, like black jade in the water, and the inner pair is not obvious. When you lower your eyes, you can see the gentle drooping of long eyelashes. When the eyes are widened, they become singular, with a peculiar smell of vegetation. Therefore, the colder the face, the more annoyed a child appeared, and there was no deterrence. I couldn't help thinking about how he became his Dolly Temple secretary. What is the princess thinking? I hurriedly smiled and said, "I didn't think of anything, and I can't think of anything." Song Langsheng sighed, put a piece of chrysanthemum-flavored meat on my plate, and said, "The princess can't remember the past, can't she remember the missing? You have blisters on your feet, obviously. After walking for a long time, I was injured by a sharp arrow piercing on my back. It must be extremely dangerous. How many hardships have you suffered in the public, and how many things have you experienced? Why didn't you mention it to me once?" A dark blue figure flashed in the depths of my mind, and the Yahanya drew like a scabbard into my heart again. I turned my head away stiffly, and said, "It's not a good memory. It doesn't matter if you say it or not. It doesn't matter." Song Langsheng slapped the table with a palm. "Do you know this period of your absence?" He didn't say anything. I stared at him blankly. "What's the matter?" Song Lang rolled his eyes to me in anger, but his tone was faint. "I just want to make the princess appetite. You don't say it, I don't say it. This horror really cannot be judged by common sense. But, how on earth did you become my husband? Political marriage or..." I swallowed. "Consensualism." He looked at me and didn't speak. The air was silent for a while. After a while, a smile appeared on her pretty eyebrows. "Wishful thinking." I was stunned for a moment. This was indeed an unexpected answer. "You, wishful thinking to me? But if I don't like you, the emperor, how can the emperor hire you to be a princess? Isn't he pampering me very much?" "I think the princess has misunderstood it," Song Langsheng said with interest. "I mean, the princess treats me wishful thinking." He smiled and said, "First, I fell in love with me at first sight, and then I was in love with each other, and then he forced me into the mansion, cooked rice and forced me to ask the emperor for marriage. Otherwise, I would be punished to death by offending the princess. You forced me to submit with the life of my people, so in the end, I compromised." He shrugged that he was finished. I stammered, You, are you joking?" He picked up the bowl and looked at me calmly and said, "This is not a glorious thing to me, why do I want princess?" I looked at him dumbfounded. Then you don't hate me. He nodded nonchalantly, indeed. However, Song Langsheng made a thoughtful look, as if he was considering how to say it. After we got married, the princess treated me a lot and followed her words. As time passed, I was slightly moved. He nibbled the chicken peacefully, and added, the so-called love and hatred is between one thought. I'm already thinking about incompetence, so you turned from hate to love. Opposite Song Langsheng calmly said, it's love and hate intertwined. Just when I couldn't figure out whether he was really talking or joking, a maid hurried into the side hall and said anxiously, Your Royal Highness, Lord Madam, Master Han came to see you. Song Langsheng didn't raise his eyebrows. Tell him we are eating, and there is no time to talk to him. The maid said, the minions have said everything, but Master Han said this time that he must see the princess. He will wait forever. Then let him simply wait until tomorrow to go to court with me. The maid looked at me tremblingly, her eyes full of hopes for help. It's not a good corner to come to Master Han, I waved. I see, I'll go out to see him later, let him wait. The maid retired now. I asked, who is Lord Han? He asked me more than once, what do you know about it? He is the official secretary, and it doesn't matter much. He just came to ask for someone. From the time the princess disappeared to the present, he has been here no less than 10 times, and every time I stopped him. I stared at the wine glass in his hand. Who does he want? Why did he ask for it? Song Langsheng took the wine glass to his mouth, then put it down. Since the princess is so curious, she will know when she goes out. This Han Shangsha really stayed in the main hall. He didn't move the refreshments in several cases. Seeing me and my horse pacing out, he hurriedly got up and walked a few steps, knelt down with my sleeves, and slammed my head, which made my heart tremble. You! What is this for? He didn't lift his head, and pressed his forehead against the cold floor. I begged the princess for mercy. I was silent. I originally wanted to pick up Master Han. If you have something to say, I always felt that this tone was too condescending, and I still said please start, and I was afraid that this would be a kind of acceptance, so I could only remain silent. This Han Shangshu saw that I didn't say anything, so I had to bow my body and stay still. The poor waist looked very unhelpful. Princess, the old minister knows that the actions of Inyazi have hurt you, and the old minister is also grateful for the princess's refusal to kill the evil. Well, it has been a long time since things have passed. After all, the unfilial son is the only son of the old Han family for 3 generations. Please see the old minister's heart to serve the court and let him go. I looked at Song Langsheng confused. He coughed slightly and said in a deep voice, Master Han, you said that Ling Lang was unforgivable. The princess was magnanimous and saved his life, but now he still wants to make an inch. This cannot be done for personal gain. I think I have some understanding, although I am more interested in how Han Shangsha's son hurt me, but unfortunately I can't ask on the spot. This Han Shangsha watched Song Lang's oil and salt not coming in, then turned his attention back to me, and continued, if the princess's approval is obtained, you can deal with the dog according to the law, or you can be exiled. It's better than in the princess mansion. How about it? I waited for him to continue talking, but he just choked up, and I couldn't help being a little upset. Master Han meant that I left him in the mansion, but I was wronged by him. Song Langsheng glanced at me slightly, and I was also a little surprised. This domineering tone said smoothly. Fortunately, Han Shangshu didn't notice anything, and said solemnly, His Royal Highness already has a bully, why can't I let go of the dog? He finally lost his highness and stayed under his nose, but it only increased his highness's sadness. I was confused by his words again. What makes me unable to let go of him? He probably listened to my questioning tone, but raised his head as if he had made some determination, and said clearly, since the princess has no place for a dog in her heart, I beg you to let him go out of the house. What's wrong with a face? I think I should be right. Han Shangshu is talking about the first face. Mian Xiao means, is it, a male favorite? My heart trembled involuntarily with this sentence, and couldn't answer a word for a long time. Han Shangshu probably thought I was startled by his action. Of course, I was shocked. There is no doubt that he fell to the ground, shaking his body. Said, I also ask the princess to forgive the minister's heart of beloved son. I looked at the consort with a dazed expression. He just stood beside me indifferently and did not escape, as if this Han Shangshu was not talking about noodles but noodles. I was so frightened that I couldn't remain silent. After a while, he said, since this is the case, Master Han will take Master Ling back. No matter what, the princess has just followed his meaning for the time being, and let's talk later. Han Shangshu looked at me incredulously. The princess is serious about this. With a hum, I turned my head and asked Song Langsheng, I don't know what the concubine wants. Song Langsheng looked at me profoundly. The princess has a kind heart, and Langsheng also feels it. This guy must be taunting me deliberately. The words naturally didn't take back the truth. The Mayuya waved the messenger to bring the son of Han out. I drank herbal tea to hide my anxiety. Not long after, 2 guards with knives really brought him up. When stepping into the hall from outside the corridor, the noon light shining with golden light on the background, you can see that the silhouette of the figure is very tall and well proportioned. It is said to have come in, somehow it is a dozing look. My old father knelt to the side and didn't show any expression. He went straight to see me and bowed lazily, I have seen the princess. After a pause, I have seen the consort. He is a handsome young man with the right senses. Although he is not as beautiful as Song Langsheng, he has a kind of magnanimous temperament. I can't help but admire my own vision in the past. The next moment I feel that this kind of thinking is absolutely undesirable. She shook her head and winked at the consort. Song Langsheng said, young Master Han is a bit more leisurely in the princess's mansion. It seems to be more leisurely than when he first came. The son of Han seemed to smile, thanks to the Princess Hungfu. My scalp was numb, and I heard Song Langsheng say, it's a pity that your good days are over, and the princess agreed to let you go out of the house. Han Shangshu reminded me hurriedly, hurry up and thank you. Oh! Young Master Han raised his eyes slightly and smiled at me, is that what the princess really meant? Naturally it was what I meant, but asking him to ask such a question made me hesitate to see if it contradicted my wishes before the amnesia. I haven't figured out what the so-called injury in Han Shangshu's mouth is. I pretended to look helpless, weighing and saying, even if my palace is reluctant to give up, I can't bear to brush my father's heart of beloved son. This is the end of the matter, it doesn't matter. Fortunately, young Master Han understood. He looked at me with a very complicated expression. He finally smiled clearly and gave a big gift to Han Shangshu, I am grateful to my father, but Fei can't follow you. Go back. Han Shangshu's color changed drastically, what did you say? Han Fei banged his head 3 times and got up and looked at me, and said to his father, I have failed the princess sincerely. Princess Meng did not abandon being able to serve in the house. Han Fei was so grateful that he would leave. Father, I and the princess loves each other, please make it happen. The so-called language is not surprising and endless. The success of these words made people die. Han Shangshu's trembling hands froze in the air, his face turned pale, and he didn't know how to deal with it. To be honest, he didn't faint on the spot. This was supposed to be a very moving drama. Because the existence of the consort was distorted, I twitched my mouth and looked at Song Langshen's calm smile like a breeze and white moon, and realized that the person who really distorted it was this princess. Han Shangshu looked at me this time as if he wanted to commit the following crimes. I gathered my clothes and wanted to persuade Han Fei to say a few words. Unexpectedly, Song Langsheng spoke again, Master Han, it is useless to talk about it now. It's not early, and I won't be with you. This is the eviction order. When the back of Han Shangshu disappeared into the hall, I felt that the ground under my feet was a little floating, especially when Song Langsheng and Han Fei were standing like Shi Shiran. I really didn't know how to deal with it. I want to simply turn around and leave, and don't say anything at all. Unexpectedly, Han Fei broke the silence first. Princess, are you still satisfied? I looked at him in amazement. The expression on his face was no longer that of Xianyun Yehi, his eyes filled with disgust, and he sneered, if torturing Han Fei is the pleasure of the princess, I will stay with him to the end. But the princess really didn't want to involve her father. My face could hardly be hung up. Song Langsheng raised his eyebrows and said, where did young Master Han say this? My father went to the mansion several times to harass. The princess has not yet blamed it, but now you are on the princess. Han Fei restrained and sneered, so Han Fei is grateful for Dade. Song Langsheng said, when will Han Fei be grateful to the princess? The sun should set from the west. Han Fei's face was unmoving and the water was unhappy. The sun originally set from the west. So you should be grateful to the princess. I looked at Song Langsheng speechlessly, so he was beating interesting Han Fei? It's a pity that Han Fei didn't realize the fun of it, so he glanced hard at me and my husband, and then waved away. It may be that the progress of the matter is too unpredictable, so I suddenly asked Song Langsheng a word. I asked, did I like Han Fei very much in the past? That's why I forced him to stay in the mansion just like you did. I regret it when I say it. Regardless of the facts, I asked my husband if I liked my male pet and how I thought it was a beggar. Sure enough, Song Langsheng had an unhappy expression on his face and said, Princess, have you ever expressed your feelings to me? I looked at his childlike frenzy and said, I just asked a few words because of memory gaps. Why is this sulking? Memory blank. Song Langsheng couldn't help raising his voice, if the princess really has a blank memory, how can she cry every night? The unexpected sound hit my apex, shocking me at a loss. It turns out that I would cry in the middle of the night in a dream. It turns out that once my heart is imprinted, it is indelible, and I still don't know it. Thinking about the corners of my eyes sore, tears couldn't stop falling. Song Langsheng was a little flustered. Princess, crying like this is too squeamish. It's okay if he doesn't say anything. When he said that I was getting more wronged, Song Langsheng was helpless to erase the water drops that I was constantly gushing. I am too stingy. At most agree to the princess. In the future, try to be more atmospheric. I snorted, and couldn't help making him laugh again. This crying and laughing is really no royal style. I lifted my sleeve to dry my tears and said, Punma, I will tell you when I can let go. This is considered reconciliation. That's weird. I used to get along with Su Fang, but if he bothered to please me, if it made me cry, I would be annoyed for a few days before he would give up. This Song Langsheng was not only moody, but also reluctant to say apology, let alone apologize. I am now a princess, shouldn't I carry the arrogance to the end? But facing this arrogant expression, the soul was instantly healed, and the unhappiness disappeared. There was no way. Back to the question of do I like Han Fei very much in the past? Song Langsheng said, Han Fei was the original consort. Song Langsheng said, Han Fei was the original consort. Before he finished speaking, he was cut back to his teeth. I was married to him. There should be a limit to the unthinkable. Song Langsheng said, young Master Han escaped from marriage on the day of his wedding to the princess. Fleeing from marriage? He was bold and reckless. How did he escape? Did he get caught later? Song Langsheng squinted, aren't you supposed to be concerned about why he escaped marriage at this time? I nodded my head and said that I would not interrupt. Song Langsheng said, I don't know the reason why Han Gongzi escaped from marriage. Because he never explained. Let me think about the analysis. Will he agree to marry like you but was forced by me to force him to get married, but because he is more arrogant deep in his heart, he would rather die than succumb to power, so he did this. Song Langsheng stared at me without saying a word, with a hint of red on his face. He was so angry that he had just promised to be more atmospheric a moment ago, so he had to hold the corners of his convulsive mouth and burst out a sentence from his teeth. Young Master Han took the initiative to show her favor to the princess during the Kyanglan banquet, which should be his favorite posture. I couldn't help being surprised. In this way, he has always abandoned this princess? That's why I abducted him to the mansion to torture him to vent my hatred. Song Langsheng said, the princess's furious anger is true, but when Han Shangshu led Han Fei to ask the emperor for sin, the princess pleaded with him to save him from death, and this matter could not be stopped. I touched my nose. Am I okay then? Could it be another conspiracy? Song Langsheng stretched his face. Why does the princess seem to want her to be gloomy? Is not it? Well, of course not. I looked at the dazzling sunrise outside the window and said kindly, this princess is moved by her realm, just like the sun is infinitely beautiful in the sky. Song Langsheng raised his sleeve to his mouth and coughed slightly. It was obvious that he was choked. I waited and saw that he didn't respond, but said, then, why did he come to the house to be my face? I don't know. Song Langsheng said, he first entered the mansion with me, and I have never asked the princess too much. So far, the topic has not continued. In fact, I still have a lot of questions, such as what does Han Fei usually do in the mansion? Have I hired him to stay in bed etc., but the atmosphere is really unspeakable at the moment. The days are still long and I am not in a hurry. Put the question up. Song Langshengui was able to talk about these emotional issues with me in the house for Dali Temple, and went out of the house after having breakfast. I have nothing to do in the study, reading the old books that I have read so hard, and I am familiar with some current historical materials and political affairs. Those dense handwritings were just a glimpse, and they remembered 7 or 8, which was a little surprising. There are rumors that Princess Xionji has seen and heard about her and fights for hundreds of times. It seems that this is the case. I checked the 2 general chronicles, and picked up a red book on the shelf. There was no handwriting on it. When it was strange, I heard the maid's impatient appeal. Alas, why the maids in the princess's mansion, Chingri, look like walking on thin ice. There was another visitor, the father-in-law in the palace. When this little brother stepped into the house wearing a blue robes with a long sleeve, I secretly sighed that this servant didn't know whether he was clean when he entered the palace. Such a majestic posture would be nothing to fight against the enemy. How could he be with the stained with a trace? Yes, this is exactly the young father-in-law who served my prince's brother, Cheng Tais Hong, personal and loyal. When I returned home, I could see him from time to time. As mentioned earlier, my brother was worried that I was extremely worried, but as a prince, he was busy with political affairs. The tribute tonics were given to me by father-in-law Cheng, and I became familiar with him a little bit after going back and forth. So as soon as he entered the room, I asked without looking up, what did the prince send? Be fair and just, Korea ginseng. I said, the fire in this palace is booming. It is not advisable to consume too many supplements. Go back and tell the prince to put the ginseng and deer antler at my place. The prince said that this is the attitude of the princess and the prince. Father Cheng smiled, the princess laughed. I hummed, turned the book, and saw that he was still not leaving, and asked, how can I become a father-in-law? Father Cheng asked, Princess Feng's body is in good health. I nodded and said, it's nothing serious. He hesitated, and said, if the princess is free, go to the palace and see His Royal Highness. He talks about the princess, but he can't put the matter in his hands. Alas, when the princess gets sick, His Royal Highness will be frowning. Father Cheng began to endlessly expound about the Prince of the East Palace. He just wanted to persuade me to enter the palace. Originally, I didn't want to see the prince alone without a husband and horse, but I could think about it again. Frankly, amnesia, this is not a big deal. Finally, my father's ears should be cocooned if he doesn't enter the palace. This palace is more than imagined, medium is bigger. After getting off the carriage and sitting for a while, Feng Hu didn't make it to the East Palace. I simply stopped the sedan chair and came out to stretch my muscles and bones, slowly strolling around the imperial garden. I followed my instinct hundreds of times on this road, but I didn't mess up the direction, probably because this section of the road was too familiar to my heart, and there was still a sense of direction in my mind. When I walked to the East Palace, I saw the figure of the father-in-law not far away. He walked into the palace to reply first. He was standing by the door of the room. As soon as I approached, I heard a loud shout from someone inside, faintly mixed with memorials. Sound. 2 disaster relief silver were robbed? After 3 months of raising, half of the 100,000 victims in Zhonghui are waiting for their lives. Now do you think that if the disaster silver is robbed, it can be used to perfuse the king? Dare to yell in the East Palace should be the Lord of the East Palace. Father Cheng saw that I was coming, and was about to go in to declare. I made a silent gesture to him, stood outside the door and listened, only heard someone said, the official bank was robbed in the Huaidong area, Yangzhou, and Huayan the prefect has made every effort to hunt down, and General Song and the sergeant who escorted the official silver that day were also taken to the prison waiting for execution, and those involved in the case. The tone of this should be the presiding officer handling this case. It may be the governor of Zhejiang's Hizi of the Jiangsu and Zhejiang generation, or he may be the official book of the Ministry of Criminal Affairs. Therefore, it is more likely that the Ministry of Criminal Affairs will still write a book. He Shangshu, this king is not asking you to kill people now. If you can solve the problem, why not kill you all at once? The prince was so angry that he couldn't help speaking. His Royal Highness. Another voice said, the top priority is to refinance the disaster bank as soon as possible, and send people to nearby Yundi's Astard states and counties to borrow grain to stabilize the people's hearts. If the people's rebellion is triggered, the situation may be even more difficult to deal with. The room was silent for a while. Those who said this dared to refute the meaning of Shangshu of the criminal ministry. His rank is superior. He should be the chief assistant of the cabinet. When the crown prince is out of control, he exhorts him. I guess it is my uncle Li Sifu and Song in 9 out of 10. Lang Sheng said that Zhao Shaofu's city mansion is extremely deep, and he will not speak easily to the truth if he is not a last resort. The prince was silent for a moment, and said, Uncle Li got what he said. I wondered at this moment that the atmosphere had eased a bit, and nodded to Father Cheng. He yelled knowingly, Princess Zionji is here. After shouting, I stepped into the study without hurriedly. The prince got up to greet me, and I looked at the bright yellow figure, and there was a hint of warmth in my heart. This is my 4-year-old brother Xiao Jinjian. Although the expression in the eyebrows is still young, he can see that he will be very handsome in the future. I don't know how many harem beauties should be deceived at that time. Of course, as long as he can ascend to the throne, the woman under the curtain will still fight for him, even if he comes out and ended like a pig. The small half of the hall was full of people, and their expressions were tense after bowing to me. I couldn't help wondering that the prince had fallen into the fire, and they were so nervous. I waited for someone to set me up and sit down. It is this princess who makes the atmosphere warm up again. Song Lang Sheng said that in front of courtiers, Princess Zionji was more amiable when she was not cruel. I picked up the teacup and drew the tea leaves with the porcelain lid, and said, You continue, don't bother with this palace. They then turned their attention back to the prince and continued to discuss political affairs. While savoring this Dongshan Biluakan, while thinking about my disappearance, the fake princess must not be able to sit here to participate in government affairs. I want to find an excuse to prevaricate the past. The number of times is too high. Those courtiers will be princesses and let the prince take control of politics. So today, I am afraid that everyone is worried about whether the situation is serious before letting the princess come out again. The uncle Guo added, now we should send a person to send the raised materials to Zhonghuai, assisting the Zhejiang provincial governor Zhang Xianyang to deal with urgent matters. The prince pondered for a moment, and then asked, do you have anyone to recommend? So he fell into silence again. I couldn't help but curled my lips. It was a hard job, not to mention that there are countless difficulties and obstacles. A slight difference is also a matter of head-to-head. However, it would be a fatal man to let someone recommended by the cabinet do it. They raised money under the banner of disaster relief and used power for personal gain in the name of the court. It is self-evident how much fat there is. If you want to track down a single force, I'm afraid it's a headless case. Sure enough, most of the officials looked embarrassed and kept silent. Li Sifu saw this, and said, the minister recommends one person, the Minister of Household Chen Yang, who has been appointed Huaiyan to promote officials, and has a deep knowledge of the people's sentiments in the Huaijiang area. I looked at the prince's face a little ugly. This is a matter of course. Let the group of account holders in the household department mix up this mess. Don't be overshadowed. Uncle, are you okay? Don't be greedy so obviously, is it good? Really, sooner or later, you will be caught. Killed. After listening, the prince nodded non-committal, swept the faces of the officials present, and finally fell on one person. Is there any suitable candidate for Zhao Xiaofu? Let me talk about it. It turned out that this old man who was about to fall asleep was the first servant Zhao Gengnian. He opened his eyes when he heard the voice of the prince calling, slowly raised his head, and said, Old minister. He coughed twice, Old minister. Coughed again. The veteran is indeed a veteran, and such a mature and serious speaking speed has to be admirable. I calmly drink tea. But after listening to Zhao Xiaofu slowly finished, the old official recommended, Zia Yang Ho Shizi, Nai Ran. I was blushing with this sip of tea. The ministers turned their heads and cast their concerned gazes. The prince even got up to caress my back and said, where is the emperor's discomfort? No. Cough, it's a serious problem. It's a serious problem. Under these circumstances, when I suddenly heard the name Nai Ran, my whole heart felt like a punch. Yes, I forgot that Zhao Xiaofu is Zhao Yanran's father, which means that he is now recommending his son-in-law. I have no time to care what the secret of this move looks like, if those fighting in the court are mixed with him, one day. In short, it is absolutely impossible. My heart was overwhelmed, and I blurted out like this, Elder Zhao Ji doesn't avoid suspicion at all. Zhao Xiaofu Wentun said, what does the princess say? I heard that Ling Qunjin married the Nai family son. I don't know how the marriage is going. Zhao Xiaofu looked calm, and said very slowly, thank you for the princess. The marriage to the Nai family has been postponed. I blame the little girl for being too arrogant. Suddenly a kind of tidal waves rose in my heart. The marriage was postponed? Why? It's a pity that I can't ask questions at this time, or even show a look of surprise, since it's the family affair of Mr. Zhao Ji. This princess can't ask too much. Mr. Ji recommended Naishizi. I don't know why. Zhao Xiaofu gave me a thoughtful look. He seemed to be thinking about my problem, and he seemed to be just wondering why I would ask questions like this. I was nervous, but listened to him. Since Naishiza became an official, I have been in Suiyang for more than 3 years, and Xia Yanghao and his old minister raised the troubles of his deceased son. Now that there is this vacancy, although it is not a good one, the old minister just mentions it. If there is a more competent candidate, the old minister will be seconded. Anyway, let him say everything. This cabinet chief is indeed an old fox. I nodded noncommittally, my mind still staying elsewhere. The prince probably felt that it was difficult to make a decision on this matter for a while. He removed the domineering expression on his face, sat next to me and held up the herbal tea, and said, if the emperor hadn't spoken, I'm afraid the errand would fall on Nairan's head. There was a slight emptiness in my heart. Why is the prince dissatisfied with him? Not to mention what he is doing. If this matter is done for him, Zhao Gengnian is afraid that he will push the boat along the river and let Nairan into the cabinet. Alas, at that time, it was his Zhao family who had the final say. I said, "Don't you still have our uncle?" The prince said, "Sister, are you talking about him at this time? Are you mocking him or me?" "I am mocking myself." He filled the tea for me, and asked with concern, "Is the emperor's body well adjusted?" "Unfortunately, I won't come into the palace to visit the muddy water of Tan." The prince scratched his head and glanced at me and said, "Look at what it says, during the time when the emperor is away, I dare not look for you publicly. I am afraid that something will happen to you and that something will happen to you. I am afraid I will be dismissed by others." Regarding the princess, you didn't even know about me when he said that he would find you back that day. He was a little excited and he stopped talking, only holding on to my sleeve. "Anyway, you can come back safely than anything else." Good. The heat in my heart was about to come out of the corner of my eyes. He is Princess Xianji's most beloved brother, and the Prince of the East Palace. Even if you forget, how can you not feel that blood thicker than water family affection? I looked at him with some gratitude, and then listened to him. In this way, someone will finally help me share the messy government affairs. Emperor's sister, that day, you went to Yulong Villa to prepare a surprise for your husband and horse to celebrate Xiaoming, but why did you disappear when everyone arrived? Where did you go for so long? I heard from the emperor that you have been seriously injured. Is there anyone? Do you want to harm you? Birthday? Surprise? Unexpectedly, there is still this kind of past. Why hasn't he heard of him mention it? Is it because the soul has been hurt too much? Well, as for why the injury injures, I hesitate to tell the prince the truth. If I confess, it is hard to guarantee that he will send someone to deal with Nairan in a fit of anger. Forget it, after all, I will not give up, and I'll be proud of it. The reason why I didn't come back was because I didn't even remember to come back. I paused. I don't remember why I was missing. That period was nothing more than living in a small village, and then I was chased and killed. Let the consort unintentionally find. The prince looked at me dumbfounded. Sister Huang means. Actually, I am amnesia. When I calmly finished telling the abbreviated version of the long omitted story, the prince was already a little bit stunned. So he was dragged by Ho Han Wenyuan like he was cooking beans and couldn't leave. In the end, he used sleepiness as an excuse to let go. But before I left, I asked more about the plan to send candidates to Jiangsu and Zhejiang. The prince suddenly said, "Don't mention the difference, forget it. I am anxious to find you for this matter, sister, throughout the Manchu dynasty, except for Lingnan. The faction is the Zhonghui faction. No matter who it is sent, it is the result, you know." I said, "There is always a clear stream who is loyal to the father and the emperor." The prince shook his head. All the people of Qingliu are shrewd and pragmatic. The current situation is unstable. How can you stand up as an enemy to Zhao Gengnian or Li Qiaji? It's slightly lighter, bigger than things, and doesn't have the courage to deal with crises at all. A big crutch came around, and I became even more dizzy. Who is the prince after all? The prince smiled. It's Han Fei from the Imperial Sisters' mansion. I thought the prince's smile was a little bit so, but I didn't bother to argue. Maybe the truth was what he misunderstood. I asked, what is his ability to fight against the two factions of officials? The prince changed his color. He can expose the crimes of his teacher at the expense of the world. What he practices is just a word of law. Only such a person can act in accordance with his conscience regardless of any external force. It is the most powerful weapon against those parties. Unexpectedly, he was such a person. Isn't this kind of person the easiest to be killed by a traitor? The prince laughed, but he is from the emperor's sister, who would dare to move? I touched the tip of my nose with a sense of guilt, and turned away. You said exposing the mentor's crime, is it the case of Fang Liang? Fang had read the old file today and vaguely remembered that the case was Han Fei. The prince said, yes, the emperor's sister. You still remember that the presiding trial of this case was the servant. Since the prince thinks Han Fei is competent, I have nothing wrong with it. When I return to the mansion to explain, he will probably not refuse. That guy looked like this princess would get moldy after a while. How could he refuse? Maybe he just started listening. Packed up. The prince heard this, and the sky suddenly disappeared. Then the emperor will be in control. On the way back to the palace, I filtered what I saw and heard in the palace today, and felt that there were a lot of things that I needed to remember. When passing by Dali Temple, I just calculated the time and let people stop the carriage, thinking about going in to visit the Dali Temple where the criminal case was in charge. Of course, it is mainly curious that the tender grass-like horses would be a good weather to decide the case. The S.I. Cheng here took me around as soon as he saw me. When he went to the study room of the Dian guest office, he offered tea soup and said, Master Song is still in front of the trial, please wait a while, princess. I guessed that I should often wander around Dali Temple in the past to create such a weak sense of existence. Of course, it is so comfortable compared to the only courtesy. This is Song Langshen's study room. My spirit of stacking is swaying beside the bookshelf. Except for the files, it is the law book. It is really boring. It is hard for him to have a weird temperament. Chingri will work with these criminal law books. Good people should hold back something. What? I was about to sneak out and I accidentally rubbed my sleeve. What is in the corner of the bookcase? It's an old fan. I picked it up and played with it. The fan bone was filled with a faint aloes, and the silk fan was not like a vulgar thing. I opened the fan, and saw only 4 characters on the side of the folding fan, don't forget each other. The gesture was elegant, and only one lang was written on the inscription. Turning to the other side, the scene of bees picking flowers under the sun is very simple. What makes me feel strange is that the gap in the middle of the fan is a long one, like a trace that was damaged by someone and then patched up. It's a familiar fan. I closed the folding fan and put it in my sleeve. I walked straight through the corridor to the side door of the rising hall in front. I looked at Song Langsheng who was on trial in the hall through the screen. He wore a crimson official robe with wide white cuffs and blue trim, which made his face like jade. I don't know if it is because of the dignity of the court, his expression is very solemn, and his sharp eyes are a little bit afraid to look at him. Don't give the inmates too much time to breathe. The few words are so frightening that people are speechless. When the reaction is over, all the defenses are pale like sophistry, and when the criminals themselves are unable to fight for themselves, the case is a foregone conclusion. This is Shaoqing of Dali Temple in Daking. It is necessary to achieve presumption and determination, and punishment must be guilty, so that no injustice is given to prison. I looked at the husband in the hall, who was completely different from the usual, and there were thousands of different tastes in my heart, which was both familiar and frightening. Song Langsheng unwaveringly struck out a sign, with a straight voice, according to the law, 100 sticks will be determined. 4 years of detention, and full day of detention. The sound of Ling Xianpsa landing like a lock, opening a box in the depths of his memory without warning. The same person, with the same posture, was executed outside Fang Liang, who was still a big Sima at the time. That day, after I got out of the hall, I, who was already waiting in the study room, when I saw Song Langsheng come in, said angrily, Song Lord, this princess has already explained that Fang Liang should not be moved, how can you condemn him so hastily? Song Langsheng said, Fang Liang's acceptance of bribes is a fact, and he was sentenced in accordance with the law. I said, it is true that he is embezzling. Don't do it for your own benefit. You can go and see his mansion. It's worse than a magistrate. What he wants is to stay in that position for longer and more stable. What he did it is also a real benefit to the country and the people. Song Langsheng said coldly, this greedy person is tens of thousands of people, and the sins of the ages are absolutely unforgivable. I patted the table with a palm. One Fang Liang is implicated in the entire princeling party. How many people are going to fall to one Fang Liang? Do you know how deep the court is? Song Langsheng stared at me, calmly, truly, powerfully and authentically. The so-called politician calculates the benefits, and considers the short and long term, while the law holder is not in vain and does not omit evil. The princess has the position of the princess, and the position of the official is the position of the official. The princess is not a person in the first place. Why should the princess bother to speak? Maybe it was his poor tone, or I was really mad. When Yu Guang caught a glimpse of the folding fan on the table, he subconsciously picked it up and tore it apart. Song Langsheng saw him and quickly stepped forward and took it from me. After passing, I was thrown away by too much force and fell heavily to the ground. When he saw that I was thrown down, he realized that it was a disaster, and he reached out to help me up. And I shook off his hand forcefully and said, "The fan that my sweetheart gave you is broken. Is it distressing? Master Song, don't worry about it. In the future, this princess will do more things that hurt you. You take it first." In a moment of trance, the past fragments flashed by. I stood there for a long time and couldn't help but smile. It was the first time that the scattered memories belonging to the princess were restored. I didn't know that I would leave before Song Langsheng, but I could actually make a joke with him and say that I remembered the past insulting him. The princess was so fierce and majestic that he was so majestic, and I endured his eyes for a while. This was a revelation. Pass. As if he talked about my wishful thinking to me lightly, as if he was really joking. Is it true that after a long time in the gentle breeze, you will not be eager for such an invincible princess, who can call the wind and call the rain, and can easily play with other people's life to fulfill one's temporary self-willedness? The more I think about it, the more it feels uncomfortable somehow. My head was hot, and I asked the coachman to speed up his whip. As soon as I stepped into the house, I came to Fu Cheng and asked him to take me to see Han Fei. Uncle Fu Chengliu is my maiden family. I don't know whether Uncle Chi is the cousin. It is said that Uncle Li Guo gave him a job in Yangzhou where he can fish for oil and water. He sent the treasures to him, and he chanted the 4 books and 5 classics of Confucius and Mencius to his bones. After retreating, many people didn't say anything about it. Together with his own salary, he contributed to the people. After a long time, he couldn't continue to be an official. Later, the emperor became a princess, that is, when I built the princess mansion, a mansion happened to be missing, and my mother remembered him. In summary, what I want to express is that Bolu is a kind and honest man, and it is more reliable to explain to him many practical matters. And an honest person like him couldn't help shaking when he heard that I was going to see Han Fei, and said, in addition to occasionally practicing swords in the courtyard recently, young Master Han mostly reads and paints in the room. I nodded impatiently, very good, lead the way. Uncle Lu said again, His Royal Highness, Lord Ma is going back to the house soon. My face finally began to cramp. What does this have to do with my going to see Han Fei? Bolu frowned and sighed with that grey old face, and finally didn't say anything more, and led me from the veranda onto the path, bypassing the other courtyard and walking to the waterside pavilion of the mansion. The water pavilion in the mansion stands in the center of the lake. There are wooden corridors that lead directly to the shore. Planting grass and trees, with shades of green trees, forcibly moved the south wind to the north, and everywhere, it can demonstrate the elegance and chicness of the princess mansion. When I arrived at the porch beside the lake, the eyes were lush and beautiful, and I couldn't help asking, where is the son of Han? As soon as the voice fell, I saw him. In the small pavilion at the half-waist of the wooden corridor, there are people sitting cross-legged and playing music. I let Bolu go back first and step into the center of the water pavilion alone. Hearing the sound of footsteps, the sound of the piano stopped, and the person playing the piano turned his head, and was startled to see that the person was me, stood up, and bowed slightly. "It's not bad, I've always worried that he would drew his sword and stabbed him directly without anyone else." He was as silent as imagined, and I spoke first. "What piece of music did you just play? It sounds like a high autumn purple sky, a drunk poetry madman." Han Fei said, "It's just a folk song, I haven't seen how high the artistic conception is." Seeing his indifferent expression, I smiled and said, "It's hard to make sense." Han Fei looked at me unexpectedly, and I said, "Is it called this name?" Han Fei said, "I never thought the princess would have heard of it." I sat down in a shady place that was out of the sun and said, "I heard people play this song before, but I thought I would never hear it again." Han Fei still didn't speak, with an expression of "Who played what music to you, what's my business?" He originally planned to exchange a few words with him to slow down the atmosphere. "Go directly to the main topic. I heard that young Master Han is in a daze with the piano besides chanting poems and paintings in the mansion, but he is so depressed, I don't know if he wants to do something for this princess. In fact, I guess he would refuse with his attitude." How can I think that his face changed suddenly after listening to me, and he sullen his face for a long while, saying, "If you don't mind, what qualifications do I have to be unwilling?" I looked at him blankly. What does this have to do with the consort? But seeing him turn his back and stand with his hands in his hands, his tone is solemn. "Since this day is coming sooner or later, the princess will send someone to give an order in the evening." Hey, I forgot his current identity is the face of the princess, so he thought I came here to ask him to do that kind of thing? Sure enough, he was wronged. How could Han Fei be so impure in his dignified manner? And, what's the matter with his attitude of forbearing humiliation? Even if I really want to find him, this princess will be the one who will lose out. I tried to adjust my mentality back to the balance point, rubbing my forehead and said, "I think young Master Han has misunderstood. If I covet young Master Han, if I have a bad heart for young Master Han, I won't wait until today to start." This sounds really awkward and tight, but fortunately, from what he said just now, I have vaguely realized that I haven't done anything to him, so he is still innocent, and it will be a little easier to negotiate. Han Fei saw that I didn't mean to meddle with him, so he relaxed and said, "I wonder what the princess is looking for." I exhaled aggrievedly, and briefly mentioned the selection of the supervisory candidate that was discussed with the prince in the palace today, and by the way, I modified the prince's high hopes for him. I just waited for him to nod. Up. After I finished speaking, there was a moment of silence, and Han Fei frowned but didn't say a word. I couldn't help asking, "Young Master Han doesn't willing?" Han Fei seemed to be meditating. After thinking for a while, he still didn't speak. I asked, "What are you thinking?" He raised his head and stared at me. "Princess, when will you fool me?" He said, "Does the princess want to kill me to give up?" I didn't move, my eyes were straight. How exactly I took him to the house that day, so that he resented to the point of distortion. I listened to Han Fei's words and felt shocked. I said, "I don't understand what you mean. I really don't understand." Han Fei smiled contemptuously. "The princess never forgets why I fell here." I really forgot. He hugged the piano and stood up, without the intention of continuing to talk nonsense with me. "If there is nothing wrong with your highness, Han Fei will leave first." I was finally a little annoyed. "You are not afraid of this palace, why should you keep your words so secretive? If you say that I fooled you and forced you to death, you must not think too much of yourself. If it is not the prince, I have forgotten that you are in the palace. The existence of, if you are greedy for life and fear of death and do not want to touch the stalls of Jiangsu and Zhejiang, to put it bluntly, you don't need to play any dumb riddles here. Han Fei had a single meal, the princess has forgotten me. Could it be that Fang Yaqin has also forgotten?" After speaking, he bowed to me and left the pavilion. Fang Yaqin? Where did this figure come from? What does it have to do with him and me? I sighed a little tiredly. Princess Xionji, you are just a 2-year-old girl, how difficult it is for this princess to be a princess, so she finally overwhelmed and jumped off the cliff to commit suicide. When he returned to Zhengyuan, Song Langsheng had already returned. He put on a refreshing and comfortable cotton robe and sat in the hall reading a book. He saw me come in and glanced at him. I heard that the princess had been to Dali Temple. Why didn't he leave without waiting for me? Up. I sat on the chair next to him, picked up the teacup on the table, and said smoothly, I can't bear to disturb your yaxing because of the soundness of the trial. Song Langsheng didn't look up at me. If you are in this situation now, if you go around and run into an acquaintance but you can't recognize it and reveal yourself, it will be more troublesome. I said, can I go and see you too? Song Langsheng still held the book. Oh. I said again, I went back to the house and chatted with Han Fei and then I came back. He hummed, still holding the book. He looked at the book, I looked at him, to see when he turned his eyes to look at me. Song Langsheng was very persevering. He stared at Ban Zuxiang at the book without turning a page, nor looking up at me, as if he wanted to become a sculpture. I decided to let him give up and asked, who is Fang Yaqin? Do you know? Song Langsheng recalled for a while and said, Fang Yaqin, seems to be the face of the princess. How come it's me and Xiao again? Why is it that every time I ask who is this curiously, the answer is verbatim and terrifying? I asked with difficulty, so, is he in the house now? Song Langsheng said, no. What kind of wind do you have? You suddenly cherish words like gold. I asked, where is the other person? Song Langsheng said, Dr. Qiaozijian. My tastes rushed for a moment. Why did my face go to the Imperial College to teach? Song Langsheng continued to calm down. If you can escape from the princess's mansion safely, you should be a man with a good heart. Why not go to the Imperial College to teach you? Mr. Ma, you can't change your habit of metaphorical satire, so it's a lot of pressure to talk to you. I shook my head, because Han Fei mentioned Fang Yaqin, there seems to be something to do with them. Song Langsheng said, they used to work together in the Imperial Academy. Then nothing else. It's no wonder that the consort was drawn as a prison by me, so how long can I escape with such a narrow-minded mind? I sighed, it seems that you are my husband, and there are some gossips in the court. Song Langsheng said, this is also true. I am determined to refuse to speak to him today. When Song Langsheng saw me swallowing the cakes round and round, he dusted my clothes. Can the princess take one of my things? I thought for a while and said, are you talking about a fan? Song Langsheng stretched out my hand, and I squinted at him. Why, it's a broken fan, just take it. Song Langsheng said, since the princess is just a fan with a broken handle, what use is it for? I remembered the phrase sweetheart deep in my memory, and turned my head unhappily. No. Song Langsheng frowned, he probably thought I was making trouble. Although I have no memory at all, I don't want my husband to pretend to be someone else in his heart anyway. I want to say this to Song Langsheng. I asked, is there any story about this fan? Why are you so precious to it? Song Langsheng's expression was a little erratic, and the afternoon sunlight came in obliquely from the window. For a while, I glanced at him and felt that he was sad. I returned the fan to him from the cuff, and went back to the bedroom. Forget it, I never understood you anyway. Perhaps, I have no right to say that he is not, whether it is because of the messy relationship with the face in the past, or the person who has never forgotten in my heart now. I find that sadness will not last more than half a day in my heart. After dinner, the horseman returned to Dali Temple and was busy with a big case. The prince confessed to me casually and accepted, but was rejected by that Han Fei strangely. How could he explain it to the emperor's brother? Thinking of Fang Yaqin, the Imperial College, I rolled off the bed and still felt that something should be done. I changed into a Confucian shirt, tied my hair, stuck a small beard, and went out. The outfit of this woman pretending to be a man was made out of the box. There are more than 10 kinds of beards alone, including all kinds of mustaches, toughest beards, and beards. In the old days, I must have loved dressing up and visiting privately, or there was a dream of a man hidden deep in my heart. If I were a man, I would be a beautiful bearded man who changed his beard frequently. The room is clean and tidy, and it is clear that he is a gentleman in official robes. I wandered around the street for quite a while, then went to a tea house beside the South Sozako Gate to sit down. Originally, there is a Yueyang restaurant next to the tea house, which is well known in Beijing. In addition to the excellent food, the price is notoriously expensive. Not to mention the small family, Zhou Zheng, the official, would not dare to enter the door, so as not to lose it. The salary is not enough for corruption to buy drunk, so most of the wealthy businessmen and powerful people go away. In fact, my intention was to try this restaurant, and I first saw a tea house. Yuelu Tea House. By looking at the name, you know that the owner of this tea house should be an arty person. I asked the nearby passers-by to find out that the shopkeeper was a student of the Imperial College. After a few years as a small civil servant, he resigned after some trials and hardships. I ran to teach at Yuelu Academy in Hunan, and now I came back to Beijing with my sons when he was old, and opened such a tea house. During this period, there are probably a lot of miscellaneous legends. Many scholars in Beijing are famous, and they often attract the supervising students of the Imperial College. Even the academicians of the Hanlin Academy come to have a drink. Over time, the reputation is actually not at all Yueyang restaurant. The guy in this tea house is extremely authentic. As soon as I entered the door, I greeted me very diligently. Knowing that I had not booked a private room, he enthusiastically led me to the second floor. The young man pointed to the countertop and said, "This meeting is the prince invited by Yuanping Building. Sing a little tune, and when the hour comes, there will be a teacher who tells the story, and many literati and elegant guests come to listen to the book." I listened to the sound of the singing, which was crisp and sweet, and it had been around the beam for 3 days. I couldn't help but nodded, and then asked, "Where is the place upstairs?" The young man said, "The height of the 3rd floor, you can enjoy the plum fragrance of the lake through the window. It is an elegant place. But today, the supervising student of the Imperial College has taken care of it, saying that it is for the purpose of talking. Son, if you have interested, it's better to listen to the little tune here first." I deliberately stopped the fan hanging in my hand, pretending to be surprised and relieved, "So they are here." Seeing the boy's questioning expression, I shook the fan and said, "Don't hide this, little brother. I am also a new supervisor, and it is rare to meet my fellow students here." The young man raised his hand wittily to lead the way, "So, please come here, my son. As you step up, you can faintly hear the sound of people's debate. When the curtain is opened, the sound is amplified and the wind is rushing. The first sentence is, 'I thought Princess Xianji had converged.'" He began to intervene in government affairs again. "I heard that it was the person recommended by Mr. Zhao Ji. Jiangsu and Zhejiang are important places for taxation. If such things happen, they should start to calm the people's hearts. How can there be any reason to shelve it? I'm afraid that Princess Xianji will place her own person on this mission again. If the prince agrees, what else would others dare to say?" I closed my eyes rather sadly. It is this princess who co-authored this group of emperor's protégés, Qingtian and Shixia, the princess. Regarding the reputation among the people, I still vaguely know a little bit. In the past, I would hear about the scholar Qin Xianji, the Princess Yunyun, who was far away from the capital, but I didn't leave that heart to listen. In the few days after wandering around Beijing, I found out that although the power of the princess was great, the people, especially the scribes, there is a black horn in his eyes, fighting in the intriguing temple, turning clouds and raining with one hand, covering the universe with one hand. Of course, when people feel sad and indignant, they still hold a longing for beauty. They believe that good and evil will eventually reincarnate in the world, and one day treacherous nephews such as this princess will taste the retribution they deserve. The 20 or so scholars in front of him clearly think so. They sat together at a table in twos and threes, expounding their views outrageously. In addition to criticizing my remarks for being a little bit radical, they also had some sincere opinions. The more I looked at them, the more panicked I was. Don't let people recognize it, and another story about Princess Xiangji's unannounced visit is unrecognizable is about to spread. The seat was full of 7 or 8. I sat down in an inconspicuous corner. When I sat down, I noticed that there was a person lying on his back on the bench beside the table with a book on his face. It seemed that I was asleep. The boy gave me it. Pour tea, serve snacks, and then withdraw first. Hearing the snapping of the folding fan, a scholar in blue who had been silent all of a sudden said, "How can the princess hold the seal of the state of prison in her hand? How can it be said that she is interfering with the government? You should not say that if you are not angry." My eyes are bright. Oops, don't you want someone to speak for me? But seeing the blue-clothed scholar raised his eyebrows, he arched his hands in high spirits and said, "As far as I can see, when you call a joint letter from the world's officials to enumerate the many misdeeds of Princess Xiangji, the introduction of the impeachment of the official impeachment, so that all the courtiers attacked, and pleaded with the princess. Granting the seal to the prince and surrendering the power of the state is the best policy. Brother, I'm afraid that this policy has not yet been implemented, you will be followed by someone first." I lowered my head to sip my tea, and suddenly heard a click again, but this time it was not a fan, but the blue-clothed scholar was hit in the head by a book. The eyes of everyone present suddenly floated over, and I blinked blankly. Obviously, it was not me who caused the damage, although I did have this motive. The person who has been sleeping on the stool sits up and yawns, but he is a handsome young man. Zhang Xianqing, if you don't have a good brain, stay in peace. Don't open your mouth. It's the way of heaven and the will of the people. The scholar named Zhang Xianqing said, "What we are discussing is about the common people's plan for the danger of Li people, what do you know?" The young son picked up the teacup and rinsed his mouth. With those eyes open, he looked directly at Zhang Xianqing. "I only know that the princess's supervision of the country is a wise decision made by the sage, and you are disrespectful to the emperor if I go. Let's file a case, let alone this year's ink, I'm afraid that you won't be able to see you idiots in the court in the future." As soon as these words came out, everyone in the room changed their colors. Zhang Xianqing tried to calm himself down. "Who will believe what you say alone?" The young man stood up and stretched his body. I realized that he was particularly bright in purple. He was not a bit bookish, but he smiled very cheerfully. "No one believes what I said. Someone should believe it when I get the first one. If you are not convinced, the majesty and prestige of a champion." No, this year's Jianyuan is my young master. If the Quozijian is really going to be a champion, it is also in my pocket, and you are out of it. It seems that the young man's confidence that no one is present has enough confidence in the performance. Zhang Xianqing completely forgot about the cultivation of literati for a while, and his voice was raised a few times. "The surname is Lu, your nasty thoughts are there in the Imperial College. I don't know. If even people like you can serve as officials, the whole government is not as bad as Huyudan." The young son curled his lips with interest. "You are telling me, why is my thinking dirty?" Zhang Xuanqing's entire face was almost green, and he pointed at him with trembling fingers. You. The young boy simply stepped on the wooden stool, lifted the corners of his robe, and flashed his eyelashes calmly. "The Communist Party of China is incomplete in a single sentence. It is really useless for you. Lu Ling, you don't want to be an official, and you don't want to envy the celebrities forever. His greatest ambition in his life is to be the face of Princess Xianji, so what's wrong with saying it? After this young son named Liu Lingjun popped out this shocking narrative without warning, I was still able to hold the T posture without changing my face, thinking that the princess' magnanimity and grace had been promoted to the highest level. A new realm. Obviously, the others present did not have such a broad mind, especially Zhang Xianqing. His narrow nostrils showed his surging turbulence. He wanted to speak a few times but he stopped talking, and finally kicked over a table. Flicked his sleeves and left, leaving the rest of the people staring left and right in a daze, leaving in anguish. So only I and Liu Lingjun were left on the whole floor. The two of us looked at each other silently, and neither of us spoke. In fact, I really don't know where to start. I have typed several drafts, saying, brothers and sisters are really ambitious and admire, or your opinion is really disagreeable. However, no matter what he said, he couldn't conceal the fact that this handsome boy distorted his heart. Fortunately, the other party spoke first. Who are you? I coughed and saluted and smiled. Listening to the small tune in the library, I heard that Qiaozijian students are talking here, and I came to see it with curiosity. If there is any presumption, I hope Xiantai will forgive me. Jun Liu Ling suddenly realized that, and asked, I wonder what your excellency thinks about what I just said. My opinion is, actually, my family really has enough noodles. I closed the fan and said, Xiantai really doesn't seem to be someone who will come to participate in such occasions. I was afraid that it was just to interrupt what the same door said. The so-called misfortune comes from the mouth. Yes, Xiantai is helping them. Jun Liu Ling was stunned, then he folded his hands and smiled. It seems that this little brother is a wise man, I don't know how to call it. I almost blurted out the word Heffen, and nowadays I feel that this name has already passed away with my mood, so why mention it again? But I can't say that this princess's surname is Xiao Qitang, and I'm afraid that brother Liu will just fall to the ground as soon as she finishes reading this name. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of the plaque by Yujing in Heaven in the Yueyang restaurant next door, and said with a smile, my name is Bai, and my name is Yujing. Jun Liu Ling invited me to take a seat. He probably felt that I was not a pedantic and stale person. But at this moment, I realized that his facial features were exquisite like jade sculptures, and there was a spirit of enlightenment all over his body. Qi, quite a trend that can inherit the beauty of the consort. But then again, fortunately, I am now in a state of amnesia, otherwise the Jialan in front of me may not be able to escape the murderous hand. Fortunately. Liu Lingjun took a sip of tea and said, Brother Bai is half right. In fact, my ambition is indeed to be the face of Princess Xianji. The corner of my eyes twitched, and I smiled and said, I don't know why Brother Liu had this idea. It is said that Princess Xianji is arrogant. Even as her cohort, she is miserable, let alone the arrogant. Liu Lingjun smiled. How did every face of Princess Xianji end up? Brother Bai knows. Each? In other words, I still haven't figured out how many faces I have. Liu Lingjun stretched out his 5 fingers and counted one by one. The first Wei Qingheng was the princess's young teacher in The Princess and the Former Princess. Brother Bai must know what the young teacher is, but he only stayed in the princess mansion for the first half of the year. Served directly as a cabinet bachelor, and now he also serves as our imperial prison. People say that if you are not a scholar, you will not enter the Hanlin, and you will not enter the cabinet. If you enter the cabinet, you will move towards the highest direction. But if you enter the princess the government, during this period of trembling for dozens of years, one province at a time, one step at a time. I rubbed the beating blue tendons on my forehead. It turned out that the first face of this princess was Wei Qingheng. Liu Lingjun prospered and said, the second Zhang Xianyang was originally the son of a criminal official who was full of crimes. The princess brought back to the government for 1 year. Now he is the governor of Zhejiang and the governor of Zhejiang. The Zhonghui bureaucrat is headed by Uncle Li. With him as a supplement, among the prestigious local officials, he has an unlimited future as the youngest. Zhang Xianyang, this name is really familiar. Ah, yes, the flood of Jiangsu and Zhejiang is to find someone who can assist the governor of Zhejiang. I said that the prince's face was full of conspiracy and tricks, and it was to make my current man do you want to assist your ex-Mali favorite. The third is Fang Yaqin, the son of the former great Sima Fang Liang. The Fang family fell because of Fang Liang's case. It is logical that Fang Yaqin would also be implicated because of this. Don't say that Fang Liang is an official. It's hard to guarantee, but because of your Royal Highness, Lu Lingjun raised his lips and smiled. He is now a doctor of the Guangguangan of the Imperial College and is in charge of the scholars of the Kuaza student industry. I silently wiped the cold sweat from the corner of my forehead, and asked, Fang Yaqin is your PhD instructing? Jun Lu Ling nodded and shook his head. I am. They are not. That group of people are students of Kuazixu. To put it bluntly, they are the descendants of the third grade or above. Most of them only talk about it. Well, I am different. I took the conversation and said with a smile, Brother Lu is the current supervisor, and I admire him a lot. Lu Lingjun turned his head a little shyly, where is it? After a pause, he turned his head and said seriously, actually, I also admire myself. As for the fourth Han Fei. Lu Lingjun frowned. To be honest, the relationship between the Han family as officials from generation to generation, his official career has always been smooth, and then he also worshipped Fang Liang as his teacher. Typical. I don't know why I'm self-defeating my future. I very much agree with him that Han Fei is indeed self-destructing his future. But then I thought about these bad things in my mind. At a young age, I recruited a group of people. No matter how I thought about it, I felt that I was the one who destroyed my future. Speaking of this, I think Lu Lingjun is a very good person, and he can speak so enthusiastically and generously to strangers. I thought it was a distortion of the heart. Now it seems that his ambition is well-founded, but it is a pity that there is already a consort, and it is a pity that I am now determined to change the evil and return to the righteousness and not continue the beasts, or I can still think about realizing his beautiful wishes a little bit. Jun Lu Ling looked at me with his chin. Brother Bai seems to be a little interested in what I said. Is it a like-minded person? I waved my hands again and again. Brother Lu was joking. Lu Lingjun laughed loudly. Brother Bai, you are really funny. I was just joking, and you blushed. Where is the house of Lord Bai? It depends on your dress. It's not like a scholar. I said, I live in the capital, and I can't be called a scholar. I have a little money in my family, but I am just idlers. Jun Lu Ling nodded. It turns out that Brother Bai is a wealthy and idler. This is the highest state I pursue. I am very envious. Jun Lu Ling and I are coming to the sound place, and there is a sudden noise downstairs. Jun Lu Ling walked to the door and looked down. He turned around and said to me, originally, all the books are here. If you don't leave, I'm afraid it will be too late to close the door. I nodded. Brother Lu, go away. Count me. Lu Lingjun waved his hand at me happily. Thank you Brother Bai, and I'll talk about it next time. Then the people disappeared, flashing extremely quickly. I listened to the storyteller on the second floor for a while and wondered whether it was time to return home. Out of the tea house to identify the direction, slowly back to the princess mansion. The more I go, the heavier I feel. The big trouble in the princess's mansion is big when it comes to it. There are also the male favorites that Lu Lingjun just talked about. 1, 2, 3, and 4 lined up. The speakers were interesting, and I was even more restless listening. I even thought, it's better to be my gentleman and not restore my memory for a lifetime, so as not to remember that I am an adulterous princess and harm more innocent and beautiful teenagers. When turning the corner, because he didn't look at the road and knocked down someone, he raised his eyes and saw that he was still a grandfather of a few years old. The grandfather arrogantly asked me if I didn't know who he was. When I arrived at the princess mansion, I only remembered that I am Princess Xianji, and I have nothing to worry about whoever he is. So I always feel that I am not as arrogant and domineering as everyone has said. I am still very amiable by nature. However, the world is dull and does not know the true meaning of it, and this princess is not familiar with them. Thinking about it like this, my whole person will illuminate another village, and after returning to the mansion, I will feel that he was born more eucalyptus and wind. Well, the previous sentence is just a modification to express my mood. In fact, after I returned to the house, I didn't even look at the shadow of the consort. He sent back a message saying that I was busy with the case and would not come back for dinner at night. Dinner without a maid is very boring. Although the maid himself is a very boring person, at least staying with him will not be too boring. I looked at the moonlit pool alone, and remembered that in the past, I would sit in a small courtyard and watch the moon with Su Fang. He was much more interesting than the cohort. He could tell stories, tell jokes, and play xiao, and most importantly, he was okay. Let me bully and stay with him, and my whole heart will settle down, calm and comfortable. Thinking about it, the eye sockets were actually wet again, and my heart was weirdly worried. It seems that it's not a problem to be alone. I patted my head and decided to go back to the study to read a book and divert my attention. After I returned to the study, I remembered a red book I had touched last time. Because my father-in-law Cheng couldn't read it during his visit, I suddenly became interested and asked the maid to make a pot of tea and sit down and read it slowly. The book is held in a weird palm. Turning over the title page, there are 3 crooked words standing upright, Tang Xin book. I almost dropped my chin on the table. This Tang, shouldn't it mean me? Open the next page and see the words. Today, Atang is practicing calligraphy, and the father praises Atang's free and easy writing. It's such a naive and ugly handwriting like a tadpole, how free and easy. Father, you can't talk nonsense with your eyes open. Really, little girls can't be used to being messy. It's easy to be lawless after a long time. That's why you will create the future Xianji. I rubbed my eyebrow peaks. So does the meaning of Tang's Heart Book mean, a Tang's Heart Book record? It's interesting. I have come down and turned page after page with interest. The candied haws and candied jujube cakes that the prince's elder brother bought for Atang was reluctant to leave it until yesterday to finish eating, and was unwell last night. The emperor said that I had eaten bad things. 10 times, when I went to see the prince's brother, his copy eyes were red, and he said he would never buy me any good food again. The belly of the queen mother is getting bigger and bigger. She asked me whether I like my younger brother or my younger sister. I said I like my younger sister. The prince brother said that he likes the younger brother. We quarreled, and finally the prince brother apologized, otherwise I would ignore him again. The queen mother actually gave birth to a younger brother, and the elder brother of the prince is so proud that he must bully the younger brother more in the future. This little brother seems to be the current His Royal Highness the Prince. However, it seems that when I was a child, I was really sticky with the prince brother, and I could get to him almost every page. It's a pity that the former Prince Xiao Jinglan, when I was 17 years old, took my beloved woman away from the world, otherwise I wouldn't be reduced to a situation where I could imprison the country. Reading the love between the lines for my brother, for a while, the feeling in my heart is difficult to describe. I thought, if I hadn't lost my memory, I would have been reading him from time to time. Just like watching a playbook, I found that my handwriting became more refined and elegant as I imitated Su Fang. Not to mention, it's really a bit free and easy, the father is really worthy of the father, and it turns out that I used a developmental perspective to look at the problem early in the morning, and I wronged him. Because I stabbed the beehive a few days ago, many bees came to sting me. The prince's brother surrounded me in his arms, and he stung all over his body. As a result, my face was still swollen. After burning, the queen asked us to go to the Yulong mountain villa outside the palace to rest, but the prince brother said it was a blessing in disguise. I was very sad, and there were small bubbles on my face. Where is blessing? I couldn't help laughing when I saw this. However, my fingertips suddenly paused on the next page. It turns out that the prince's brother didn't lie, it was a blessing in disguise. I know a big brother. My eldest brother doesn't know that I am a princess, and he still treats me as a prince's little palace lady. Big brother said that I am the most ugly little girl he has ever seen, and the cutest little girl he has ever seen. I think I like Big brother. So is this the first love of this princess? I hurriedly turned down, but found that the next few pages were blank. When the handwriting appeared again on the page, only one sentence remained: Big brother is gone. Atang waited for him under the maple tree for a day, but he still didn't come. He didn't abide by the agreement with Atang. Agreement? What is the agreement? I wanted to read it with curiosity, but after that I never mentioned anything about this big brother. Judging from the growth state of the handwriting, I should have not touched this diary for a long time. Until the last page, the penguin has long been a real dragon, but I wrote in Xingkai straightforwardly, Atang will get married tomorrow, that person is not him. Those who have not been able to wait in 4 years, I hope to spend another 4 years. Can truly forget. Gone. I closed my eyes, forbeared forbearance, and then opened. Isn't it? So when I got such a thick book, I didn't even mention the name of this big brother. Is it okay to draw a portrait anyway? This way, the appetite is completely lifted, and it is uncomfortable to be tied in the air. I turned the red book back and forth in despair, but I still couldn't find any clues. In the end, he threw the book on the table in anger. Maybe the force was too great, or maybe the wind outside the house was so loud that the pages of the book snapped. Then, something mixed in it flew up, and when the wind dissipated, it slowly landed on the palm of my hand. A maple leaf? No, it's a palm-sized piece of paper, painted with the color of a maple leaf, cut into the shape of a maple leaf. I was stiff. So strange, so familiar, everything in the body seemed to disappear, only this piece of paper maple remained in his eyes and heart. Without warning, without reason, my heart began to throb. The fragrance of tea seeped into the wind and rippled in the room, and I slowly pressed my hand to the place of my heart. Why, I obviously didn't remember anything. But there is no way to stop this heart like a deer hitting like a drum. I touched the beating heart in my chest, put the paper maple back into the book, and put the heart book back in its place. A touch of lake color appeared outside the door, and I looked up and was stunned. Squad horse, are you back? Song Lang Sheng nodded and said, when I came back, I saw that the princess was not in the house. I heard someone say that he was in the study. He walked closer and frowned. Why are you so pale? I said, somehow, my heart beats like thunder when I read it well. Song Lang Shen's expression instantly became solemn, and the next moment he held my wrist nervously. I was taken aback and asked, what's the matter? He didn't answer my words, he seemed to be thinking about something. I don't know if the lights are too dim. I don't think his eyes are focused when looking at me, as if he's not listening to me at all. After a long while, he finally said, I'm getting my pulse. I was astonished and said, it turns out that the concubine can be used to medicine. Song Lang Sheng glanced at me lightly and said, well, I just didn't touch the princess's heart, so I didn't feel the beating. Me? What are you doing for a long time? Song Lang Sheng said, the heartbeat is violent for no reason, it is very likely to be a heart disease. The princess has suffered an arrow injury before and has a slight difference in her eccentric pulse. I am afraid the disease is related to this. When he said that, I also felt that something was right. My heart disease was a serious matter, so what should I do? I don't know if I want to ask an imperial doctor to come for treatment. But seeing him like this seems to be something that requires careful consideration. Song Lang Sheng let go of my hand, turned around in the gloomy night, turned his back to me, was silent for a long while, and said, "Of course it's a doctor." Me. This heart disease might have scared him out. When Dr. Su arrived, my heart stopped beating. Oh, I shouldn't say that, because my rhythm has returned to normal. After we explained the symptoms to him, he leaned over, squinted, watching my complexion for a long time, and said solemnly, "The princess's pulse is stable, but why the more the old minister checks the pulse, the faster the heartbeat of your highness. You always look at me in silence, can you not think about it?" Song Lang Sheng asked, "But is it a heart disease?" Grand Dr. Su shook his head, "His Royal Highness is fine, and she has no symptoms of heart disease." But Song Lang Sheng and I waited for him to say nothing. Tai Su said, "It may also be a hidden heart disease that has never appeared in medical history." The veteran dare not jump to conclusions. This is clearly a way to leave yourself a way out. The old man Su Tai is actually the head of the hospital. No wonder my father is still in a coma until now. I am very worried about the health of the crown princes in the palace. Tai Su was about to go back to his hometown. At the end of the day, I remembered something. Did the Taiyuan hospital recruit new healers recently? Tai Su said, "The hall officer has come to the hospital to preside over the examination. There are already 10 people waiting for the test." I wonder why the princess asked. I didn't answer his words directly, and asked, "Is there anyone with the surname Zhou?" Mr. Su thought for a while, and said, "There is a person named Zhou Wenyu who is the most familiar with medical etiquette among the selected healers. Unfortunately, he is too old and has a frivolous attitude. He has had little rifts with a few others. I think it was the genius doctor of benevolence who saved my life and didn't run away." I knocked on a few cases with my knuckles, and said, "This Zhou Wenyu has excellent medical skills. I saw him with his own eyes in the private microservices of the Japanese palace in the past, and I have always been very concerned about it." In this way, does Dr. Su understand? The old Dr. Su trembled and said, "This person doesn't like to follow the rules. I'm afraid that it will cause serious problems if he is admitted to the hospital." I smiled, "The Dr. Su is very worried, but it is a pity to let him go to the princess mansion easily. It is better to let him come to the princess mansion as a medical officer. What do you think is recommended by the hospital?" Dr. Su glanced at me with a shaking beard, and tremblingly agreed, after he bowed his head and rushed out of the princess's bedroom with his medical box on his back. I pointed to his back and looked at Song Lang Sheng blankly. What is he afraid of? Song Lang Sheng played with the porcelain sculpture on the table, and said leisurely, "I should be worried that I won't be able to keep it in the evening." I wondered, I'm afraid that Zhou Wenyu will cause a catastrophe when he enters the hospital? I clearly said that it was elected in my name. If there is any problem, his right depends on me. Song Lang Sheng raised his eyes and glanced at me, vaguely rolling his eyes. The princess has some fame, and it is a little frightening. He is probably familiar with the posture of the father-in-law. I filtered Song Lang Shen's words, and when I realized the essence, I suddenly said, "He thought I was the first to recruit Zhou Wenyu." Song Lang Sheng said, "Yet." I continued, "Then he wondered that he was about the same age as Zhou Wenyu, and his appearance was deeper and calmer than Zhou Wenyu. He realized his crisis, so he panicked." Song Lang Sheng said, "Yet." I smiled and said, "So this princess's hobby of year-end love will spread." Song Lang Sheng said, "Yet." I also nodded. I picked up the pillow on the bed and threw it at Song Lang Sheng. Song Lang Sheng was really hit without paying attention, but the suffocated smile on his face was on the verge of breaking out, and he couldn't stop laughing. Everything has to be done. Song Lang Sheng will accept it as soon as he sees it, and return the pillow to me, saying, "The princess should rest early. We will discuss matters tomorrow morning. If we can't make trouble, we can't say anything." This point, the prince mentioned, since he has recovered from illness and can enter the palace, there is no reason for the princess to not go to court. Song Langshen's eyes glanced at my bedside position. It belonged to him in the past, but he told me to drive away before. Seeing that I didn't mean to keep him back, his expression moved, as if to say something, but again without saying, touched my head and went back to his room. After I fell asleep, it was difficult to sleep. There are many things in my heart, which can't be solved anyway. Turning back and forth several times, I simply put on a robe and went out to blow the air. As soon as I opened the door, I saw a person standing by the corridor extending from the bedroom. I also looked at Lone Moon and Han Xing, unable to sleep at night. I walked over, and from the corridor, I could see the small pond banana grape racks in the small courtyard. Although it was not as elegant as the water pavilion, it was considered to be an interesting mood. Song Langsheng heard the footsteps and looked back, and said, "Why hasn't the princess stopped yet?" I leaned on the wooden fence and said, "Something I didn't figure out, and I couldn't sleep properly. Where's the squad?" With a face full of thoughts, "Do you feel sorry for the same illness?" Song Langsheng opened the thin bamboo curtain beside him and said, "What I can't figure out is the case." I asked, "Have you been like this before?" "What?" "That's it," I pointed at his frowning brow. "Seng Ri is worried about business, indifferent, and indifferent to joy and anger." Song Langsheng smiled non-committal. "Then what about me?" I stared at his side face under the lamp. "Is it true that it is as rumored to be arrogant, relying on power to behave, covering the sky with only one hand?" He looked into my eyes and asked, "What does the princess think?" I sighed, I clearly forgot. He said, "It's not that it was before the amnesia." "Since your amnesia, what kind of person do you think you are?" I was stunned. I didn't expect him to ask this question, but since he talked about it, he might as well ask himself, what kind of person is Heffen? Willful, bad-tempered, I like to make trouble if I don't like it, and I don't like to suffer hardship. I laughed as I recalled, comparable, I often envy others and often dislike myself. Song Langsheng did not interrupt and continued to listen to me. Some things are clearly in hand, but they are always on thin ice. Some things are clearly wrong, but they always go to the dark. In the end, there is no way except for admitting and complaining. When I said this, although I was smiling, but I didn't hold on, I should be a little lonely when I wanted to go. The dark clouds above just dispersed, and the moonlight shone all over me, which was quite dazzling. I heard a slight wave of voice beside me, it's kind of self-knowing. I glanced at him. "You are a mockery, is it ironic?" Song Langsheng said, "It's ridiculous and ironic." Song Langsheng rubbed my hair again. He seemed to have a habit of messing up people. "Princess, you are the same now and different from the past." "Which?" Song Langshen's face and the bottom of his eyes seemed to flash by. "Even if it is a dark road, as long as the princess finds it, she will definitely go to the end, never admit it, never give up." In such a trance, I thought his words were full of kindness and approval. Song Langsheng said, "That's why there are so many poor people planted in the hands of the princess. It seems that good communication is simply an illusion. He is a well-known poisonous tongue horse, and I am actually still a little immersed in this good night scene." I turned around in anger and decided not to speak to him for 2 days. But in the next moment he was held by a big hand, including me. I turned my head in surprise. Song Langsheng exerted some force in his hand, pulled me to the grass outside the corridor, and then dragged me to sit down together and said, "Lie down." I couldn't help him, and he said, "Now, can't even hold hands anymore." I was taken aback, and shook my head wittily, "I didn't mean it." He changed the posture of holding his hands to 10 fingers clasped together. I was sitting a little cramped with my pillow in the grass. I could only lie down next to him as he wanted, learning that he raised his head and watched the night lights flicker. He suddenly said, "Now it's changed over." I doubted, "What?" At that time, I didn't like the princess at all, and I didn't want to be alone with the princess. The princess always used the imperial power to intimidate me. I also had a lot of grievances. Once, you were so unreasonable and forced me to lie here to accompany me. Look at the moon. Song Langsheng lowered his voice with a deep smile. In fact, there was no moon at all that night, and I couldn't even look at the stars. The two lay in darkness like this. I couldn't help saying, "Isn't that scary?" Song Langsheng said, "Being with the princess is a horrible thing anyway, I have already put my life and death out of my mind." I glared at him, thinking for a long time and couldn't figure out how to refute. "Fine, since the first time you talked about our past, I won't care about you for the time being." Song Langsheng looked at me, smiled faintly, and said nothing. Gradually, tiredness swept over, and there was a void between heaven and earth, and I didn't know when to enter the dream state. I just dreamed of something. I woke up the next day, but I couldn't remember it anymore. Today is the first time I have gone up after losing my memory. There are 2 chairs next to the empty dragon chair, which are reserved for the prince and me. I used to sit there as the imposing princess of the country. But at this moment, leaning on the top and looking down at the Begwanchayawai, I felt shocked, and some of it couldn't hold up the scene. At the beginning of the meeting, the prince gave a few words about my return. After that, the group of people responded, and I nodded with a symbolic smile, and then proceeded to the topic. After all, it is about flooding in Jiangsu and Zhejiang. The official bank for disaster relief was robbed, and the prince made an order to allocate silver. Unexpectedly, this allocation caused a new problem. The national treasury was in deficit. Deficit is not something that can be understood in a moment. Moreover, it is usually due to excessive expenditure in the palace and the corruption of officials. If you really want to thoroughly investigate it, you will expose the old bottom of the royal family and the officials of the 2 parties. Don't say that the crown prince has not yet been sitting in the position of the crown prince. Even if the father is not sick, he may not dare to move the knife easily. Up. In desperation, the prince could only put the matter aside, and his main focus shifted to the solution. What Zhao Dang is the backbone of is the policy of reverting rice to mulberry, changing rice fields to mulberry fields, raising silkworms and weaving silks, using silk to get rid of the dilemma of the treasury, and then using it to rebuild the disaster-stricken areas in Jiangsu and Zhejiang. Mean. The objection is the Kingliu in North Korea. The reason is nothing more than the huge project, the trial of internal policies, etc. As for Li Qiaoju's unprecedented neutrality this time, it is estimated that he is weighing the pros and cons and watching the changes. Seeing the half-old officials above the court arguing against each other, the prince's sharp words made the prince distraught. I listened half-heartedly while thinking half-heartedly. I was mainly thinking about how heavy I slept last night, and I was not awakened even when the concubine took me back to the house. Standing in the 3rd row, Song Langsheng looked at the front calmly with his eyes calmly, without the awkward appearance of being with me on weekdays. Alas, it's extremely hypocritical to have a set of people in the front and another in the back. With deep emotion in my heart, I couldn't help but shook my head. It happened to be seen by a certain scholar who was generously speaking. He was also taken to disagree with him. The prince turned his head to look at me and asked, "What's the matter with my sister?" Proposal. I said and said, "Let's listen to what the ministers say first." The prince knew that my memory loss should not be too much to say, so he turned the topic back to the courtiers. Unexpectedly, someone present said in a loud voice, "Princess Xianji is in charge of the country. Since all the adults see what they see, it is better for the princess to decide. Why are you arguing?" As soon as the voice fell, 3 or 2 officials immediately expressed their approval, and then most of them raised their sleeves and nodded, asking me to show their intentions. I squinted to look at the speaker, and I couldn't help being shocked. This old man with a beard was actually the grandfather I knocked down on the road yesterday. At this time, he looked solemn and stared at the circle of courtiers standing around him. "Hold me!" When he asked me arrogantly yesterday who he was, my answer was, I don't know him. As a princess of Jiangguo, how can you not know the important ministers of the court? I turned my gaze to Zhao Xiaofu. He still looked like he was about to fall asleep, but a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Did you smell something? The prince was about to speak for me. Uncle Li said, since the princess has different opinions, it is okay to talk about it. The ministers have always bowed their heads to Her Royal Highness. I am calm, but there is nothing in the 5 areas. The 2 factions of the cabinet, which are always opposed to each other, are unexpectedly aligned today, and the person they want to target is me. To be more precise, it was necessary to cut off the strongest backing before the crown prince was full of wings. This posture does not seem to be accidental. I'm afraid the fake princess has made people suspicious because of the curtain. If yesterday's exposure was the fuse, then if I can't hold back the scene at this moment, I can only verify their guess more. At that time, she was a real princess, and she will become a fake. Even if the truth of the amnesia is revealed, a princess who has lost her memory will still be questioned. How can she be the director of the country? I looked down at the bodies of the ministers reflected on the smooth, mirror-like ground, and remained silent. The veteran who took the lead when he saw this, took a step forward with a face of success, and said, in the past, the princess's actions to examine the truth can be done, why today? Is there enough trouble? A voice interrupted him. It is me who said this. I slowly stood up, looked at him blankly, and said, Yang Rulan, Master Yang, who never speaks up on the initiative, today, who lent you this courage to speak out? Master Yang opened his mouth, and he didn't realize what I was saying, or why I could call his name. I scanned the hundreds of officials in the hall, looking clearly at each face. The slightest movement, carelessly, seemed to be able to see the ripples. Master Yang may think that I am bluffing, and his face pale and honest. I don't know what the princess said. The old minister is just. I said, dare to ask Master Yang, what is the crime of stealing power and abandoning industry and leading the country? Master Yang stammered, Gong, why does the princess have this question, veteran? I picked up a memorial on the imperial case, and threw it on Master Yang's face, sternly, change the rice to the mulberry. Master Yang, as a scholar of the palace, you thought of taking the royal salary and civil disasters. Is it such a bad idea? Master Yang shuddered and knelt down. I coldly glanced at the ministers and said sharply, where is Jiangsu and Zhejiang? 7 mountains, 2 rivers, and 1 field. The self-sufficiency of food is still a problem for the people. Now you let the farmers take care of it. The rice fields are changed to mulberry fields. Is it to force them to die? They can't have enough to eat, and how can the price of raw silk be sold at a good price? The silk raised in mulberry fields is made into silk, and the merchants get the intermediate profit, and the silk is sold to outsiders. Clan people, if the sea is not peaceful, what should we do if we can't get out? A change from rice to mulberry, have you counted the number of people involved? From the emperor to the people of Jiangsu and Zhejiang, from the governor of Zhejiang, governor, court official, prefect, and county magistrate, from Zhejiang to Jiangsu and Anhui. The silk spinning bureau and the silk merchants will all be involved. This is up and down the next round. How many articles are still in the treasury? The national treasury's deficit is for squandering up and down. First of all, you think about plundering the people. If it provokes civil rebellion, then plundering it for business, killing wealth and greed, you just talk about it. What else can be wronged by karma? The adults think that the prince and the palace do not care about your previous mess, so they learn to be arrogant. Inside the hall, everything was quiet, and Zhao Xiaofu had been in a drowsy expression. Hearing this, Zhao Xiaofu suddenly opened his eyes, knelt down tremblingly, and said, the great sin of the minister is no longer available for fainting. I walked down slowly, step by step, and came to Zhao Xiaofu, saying, Yang Rulin is the person recommended by your old Zhao Ji. If you don't handle it properly today, why do the officials know that Zhao Xiaofu is so selfless? Zaifu robes. After hearing this, the civil and military men of the Manchu dynasty finally knelt down together, and said in a trembled voice, I beg the princess to calm down his anger. I silently put the trembling hands in my sleeves behind my back, and then a smile appeared at Song Langsheng, who was calm and restless from beginning to end. Note: the change from rice to mulberry was the national policy during the Jiajing period of the Ming dynasty. Since this article uses the Ming system, I borrowed from this small matter. The person who admired this national policy in the Ming dynasty was Yan Songjian. If you are familiar with that period of history, maybe you will find that the first assistant of Zhao Gengnian in this article is equivalent to Yan Song. Yan Song's words are not a big evil official in the traditional sense, and sometimes they are helpless. These will be mentioned later. I hope you will see this part of governing the country. Don't get up too hard. I will try my best to abbreviate it.